Chapter 289. After Di Feng left, a group of silhouettes soared through the air, departing from the White Deer Institute. Naturally, they had already guessed who these people were. Today's events had already exceeded their expectations. With the appearance of the Azure Emperor token and the appearance of the Celestial Lake Palace, they all understood that it was impossible for them to complete their mission in the White Deer Institute. They could only temporarily leave. Not only that, this was an extremely ominous sign for their future plans. The Azure Emperor token already had an owner, and in addition, it had the support of Fairy Qing. In this case, if they wanted to control the hidden faction left behind by the Azure Emperor, it would be exceedingly difficult. Because Qin Wenyan, the successor of the Azure Emperor, would also be able to do what they wanted, becoming the absolute leader of the hidden faction. To Di Feng, the only thing he could do now was to speed up his growth and increase his combat prowess to the heavens. With absolute strength, even the Azure Emperor token would be suppressed. After killing the four of them, only then did the people from the Celestial Lake Palace quiet down. They landed on the ground and stared at Qin Wenyan, as well as at Qin Wentian's side, Qin, young Master Qin, Princess Qin. The crowd bowed to the two of them. Qin Wenyan was the successor of the Azure Emperor, while Qin was the person Fairy Qing Mei doted on the most. In the Celestial Lake Palace, Princess Qing status wasn't any lower than the palace mistress. Lightly nodded her head as she quietly stood there. The people from the White Deer Institute stared at this breathtakingly beautiful maiden in shock. So it turned out that the fairy-like maiden beside Qin Wenyan actually had such a terrifying status. These people all respectfully referred to her as Princess Qin. All of you, immediately seal off all news of this. Do not let anyone else know. The patriarch of the White Deer Institute waved his hands as he spoke to the elders of the White Deer Institute. The events that happened here today would definitely attract the attention of the outside world. What they needed to do now was to make amends. Don't worry, we're descending from the sky. Besides the members of White Deer Academy, practically no one will be aware of our arrival. If we do our best, no one will be aware of our arrival. The middle-aged woman spoke to the White Deer Patriarch. Today, other than the Celestial Lake Palace, there were also the White Deer Institute and the D Clan. Although these people had different standpoints, none of them would allow the matter of the Azure faction to be exposed. Okay, I'll arrange it. The White Deer Patriarch lightly nodded his head. The news of the deaths of the fourth-ranked Grandmasters couldn't be hidden. After all, Wind Valley and a few others were present at the scene. The middle-aged woman arrived in front of Qin Wenyan and Qin. She smiled at Qin Wenyan. This dignified woman's smile was very beautiful. Did you bully my Qin heir? The middle-aged woman joked. Heir? Qin Wentian's eyes flashed. Bullying Qin heir? He couldn't even see Qin heir. This girl usually appeared and disappeared mysteriously. He didn't even know where she was. Senior sister, why did you bully me? Qin heir's beautiful eyes flickered as she spoke in a melodious voice, causing black lines to appear on Qin Wentian's forehead. This lass was so pure and adorable. The middle-aged woman laughed when she heard Qin heir's words. However, she was already used to it. She pulled Qin heir's arm as they walked to the side. Qin, Master wants me to ask you a question. The middle-aged woman spoke in a low voice. The middle-aged woman spoke in a low voice, her words causing Qin heir's beautiful eyes to blink as she replied in a low voice. What does Master want to ask? Master wants to ask you, do you like him? A crafty glint flashed in the eyes of the middle-aged woman. How was this something Fairy Qing Mei wanted her to ask? It was obvious that she wanted to tease the pure and innocent junior sister Qin heir. How could the pitiful Qin heir know so much? An expression of contemplation appeared on her face as she seriously replied, I don't know. Qin Wenyan, who was at the side, rolled his eyes. Although their voices were soft, he could still hear them clearly. What do you think of him? The middle-aged woman smiled. Qin heir's eyelashes fluttered as she turned her head to glance at Qin Wenyan. Very adorable. Cough cough. Qin Wentian's forehead was filled with black lines as he heard Qin heir's voice. Incomparable melancholy filled his heart. Very adorable. the pure and innocent Qing'er still remembered his explanation of the word adorable back then. The middle-aged woman couldn't help but laugh out loud. After which, she turned her head and stared at Qin Wenyan with a smile that was not a smile on her face, only to see an expression of awkwardness on Qin Wentian's face. Little sister Qing'er is the apple of master's eye. You have to take good care of my Qing'er, the middle-aged woman said with a smile. Although she was smiling, she couldn't help but exude a sense of majesty. Her status in the Celestial Lake Palace was obviously very high. This time, she had personally brought people here to intimidate those people so that they would remember her in their hearts. Senior, actually, Qing'er has always been the one taking care of me. Qin Wenyan felt somewhat ashamed. Ever since he met Qing'er, she had always been the one protecting him in the dark. It's good that you know. If I found out that you bullied her, I won't forgive you. The middle-aged woman was extremely concerned about Qing'er. She couldn't help but repeatedly remind Qin Wenyan. Although she spoke in a joking tone, her tone didn't seem to be fake. Her true feelings were hidden in her words. At the side, the people from the White Deer Institute were extremely quiet. At this moment, they were thinking in their hearts, if this woman was already so terrifying, who was her master? As for the 5 elders of the White Deer Institute, they had already guessed who the person who had come was. They also had a clear understanding of Qing'er's status. All right, Qing'er, we have to return. The middle-aged woman spoke to Qing'er, only to see Qing'er lightly nodding her head. She didn't try to persuade them to stay. The middle-aged woman was already familiar with her temperament and naturally wouldn't blame her. This fairy-like junior apprentice sister of hers was so pure and adorable that she didn't even eat the food of the mortal world. Take good care of Qing'er. The middle-aged woman turned to Qin Wenyan as she spoke. Qin Wenyan lightly nodded his head as he asked, Senior, are we leaving now? We've already done what we needed to do. Most of the time, you still have to rely on yourself. Don't expect us to give you any help. As the successor of the Azure Emperor, it's impossible for you to rely on the strength of others. After speaking, the middle-aged woman soared up into the air. A terrifying gust of wind enveloped her as a pair of gigantic wings appeared on her back. One figure after another soared into the sky, rising higher and higher. They rushed into the clouds and gradually disappeared from everyone's sight. They had arrived in a grandiose manner, but they had left in silence. Those from the Celestial Lake Palace only wanted to do one thing. They wanted to help Qin Wenyan establish his prestige, and let those from the Qin clan know of Fairy Qingmei's attitude. After the departure of those from the Celestial Lake Palace, those from the White Deer Institute heaved a sigh of relief. The eyes of the White Deer Patriarch stared into the distance, as a look of contemplation appeared on his face. Wenyan, from now on, you can stay in the White Deer Institute with peace of mind. If there's anything you need, just tell little E, or come look for me, the White Deer Patriarch stated to Qin Wenyan. Okay. Qin Wenyan smiled as he nodded his head. The attitude of the White Deer Patriarch was completely different from before. From today onwards, seeing Wenyan is the same as seeing me. However, this matter cannot be revealed in front of outsiders. The White Deer Patriarch spoke to the crowd. Wenyan, you should be able to understand this point, right? Great-grandfather, don't worry, Wenyan understands. Qin Wenyan smiled. There's one more thing that I've discussed with little E before. Even if I truly control the White Deer Institute, I won't casually order the White Deer Institute to do anything, and I won't allow the Institute to be in danger. Before I have absolute strength, I won't reveal the relationship between the White Deer Institute and the Azure faction. I understand what you mean. However, this White Deer Institute has a long history, and there are some things that I can't make the decision alone. The White Deer Patriarch continued, I'll call for a meeting of the doyens now. If there's any decision, I'll inform you. At this moment, the White Deer Patriarch's intention of calling for a meeting of the doyens went without saying. Evidently, it was for the sake of him, the successor of the Azure Emperor. Everyone, please inform the doyens of the White Deer Institute, the White Deer Patriarch instructed. The White Deer Institute had a history of over 1,000 years, and its foundations were extremely deep. Naturally, the White Deer Institute didn't only have the 5 patriarchs and the 9 doyens. There were also the doyens from the previous generation, and even the doyens from the previous generation before that. Many of them were extremely powerful, and they were all doyens. It was just that they didn't manage the affairs of the White Deer Institute and were either cultivating or roaming the world. Unless something major happened, the White Deer Institute wouldn't summon them. The crowd nodded their heads in agreement. It had been too long since the White Deer Institute had summoned the doyens. "Let's go." The White Deer Patriarch spoke to an elder beside him. That elder glanced at Qin Wenyin, his eyes gleaming with sharpness. This elder was none other than Bai Lu Tong's father. Qin Wenyin knew that after today's events, this elder would definitely hate him. But he believed that since the White Deer Patriarch had already expressed his stance, he would definitely handle this matter well. After the 5 patriarchs departed, the large-eyed elder walked up and patted Qin Wentian's shoulder as he smiled. "Don't take today's events to heart. A 19-year-old grandmaster, your talent in the martial path can even cause others to overlook it. Being able to obtain the inheritance of the Azure Emperor, as well as gaining the approval of the Celestial Lake Palace, I can already imagine that your talent in the martial path isn't inferior to that of the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. It's just that your talent has been masked by the Divine Inscriptions. Work hard, even without the White Deer Institute. I believe that your name will shake the entire Grand Xia. Grand Elder praises me too much. Didn't everything go well today?" Qin Wenyin laughed, as the large-eyed elder nodded his head in agreement. The news of Qin Wenyin becoming a 4th-ranked divine inscriptionist soon circulated around. It was impossible to hide this news. A 19-year-old divine inscriptionist soon caused a commotion in the eastern region of the Moon continent, and even attracted the attention of the star-seizing manor. A 19-year-old 4th-ranked divine inscriptionist appearing in the Moon continent? This had never happened before in the history of the Moon continent. Sadly, there weren't any transcendent powers in the Moon continent that paid attention to divine inscriptions. If Qin Wenyin was in the War continent, there would definitely be too many transcendent powers vying for him. Naturally, even in the Moon continent, there were many transcendent powers that started to investigate this genius, hoping to recruit him. As for the Lung clan in the eastern region of the Moon continent, when they heard this news, those in the upper echelons of the Moon continent who knew of the grudge between Qin Wenyin and the Lung clan were so angered that they almost vomited blood. Chapter 290. Qin Wentian's name was extremely unfamiliar to the upper echelons of the Lung clan. Only a few elders knew of him. Back then, Lung Mao had a grudge with Qin Wenyin because of Leng Ning, and Qin Wenyin had defeated Yen Tai, depriving the Lung clan of the opportunity to participate in the refinement grounds. Under such circumstances, Leng Mao naturally chose to suppress the matter of Qin Wenyin. But now, when the news of Qin Wenyin becoming a 4th-ranked grandmaster circulated around the Lung clan, this matter could no longer be suppressed. Soon, the ins and outs of the whole thing were thoroughly figured out and spread throughout the Lung family. In the great hall of the Lung clan, there were many people gathered. Other than some of the upper echelons, there were also a few elders, Leng Ning's uncle Leng Jian, Leng Ning's cousin Leng Lin, as well as those who were related to Leng Ning's death. The atmosphere in the great hall was solemn, as though there was a sense of oppression. A 4th-ranked grandmaster at the age of 19 could have been a very good friend of my Lung clan. But now, he's been pushed to the side of the Leng clan's mortal enemy. What have you guys done? The person seated at the head of the hall was a sturdy old man. His gaze swept over Leng Jian, Leng Ning, and the rest, causing them to lower their heads, not daring to breathe too loudly. During the exchange of the star-seizing manner, Qin Wenyin had spared no expense to kill Yen Tai. From this, one could see that Qin Wenyin was determined to avenge Leng Ning. How could Qin Wenyin not bear a grudge against the Lung clan? He hadn't taken revenge yet because he didn't have enough strength. However, once Qin Wenyin joined a transcendent power, or if he grew stronger, the Lung clan would definitely suffer the wrath of the Lung clan. The hatred of a 19-year-old 4th-ranked grandmaster was something that could not be ignored. Initially, the Lung clan intended to hand Leng Lin over to Yen Tai. Is that true? Leng Mao nodded his head. That's indeed the case. After that, Lung Lin found a companion, and with Lung Jian's pleading, it was changed to Lung Ning. Is there a shortage of maids at the weapon refining hall? The old man asked. At that instant, Lung Lin's face turned deathly pale. No. The Lung clan was a clan that focused on researching divine inscriptions. In the Lung clan, there was a specialized weaponsmithing hall where weaponsmiths gathered. Among these weaponsmiths, there were divine inscriptionists of the Lung clan, as well as guest divine inscriptionists. When they were refining tools or cultivating martial arts, they also needed maidservants to take care of them. Occasionally, these people would also do the deed between men and women to vent their lust. So, naturally, they would find maidservants. Therefore, the maidservants of the big clans were all very beautiful ordinary people. They had no status. It was fine if they met a good person, but if they met a bad person, they would be abused. Don't want it? Don't tell me that no one needs to take responsibility for this matter? The dignified old man glanced at Lung Lin and said coldly, "Tell the person in charge of the refining hall that this is the young lady of the Lung family. The reward will be given to the refining grandmaster." "Father, save me!" Lung Lin screamed to Lung Jian. Lung Jian's face was flushed red, yet he was doing his best to endure it. Now, he couldn't even protect himself. "Lung Jian, you will be sent to the refining hall as an odd job servant for 10 years. The dignified old man spoke again, causing Lung Jian's body to tremble as an expression of agony appeared on his face. Being an odd job servant meant that he had to help the Grandmaster inscriptionists temper their embryos and refine the materials required for the forging of weapons. He was treated as a servant, and from then on, he became a lowly person, a servant, akin to a pig or a dog. Lung Mao, as a managing elder, you are also guilty. Bring some generous gifts and go to the White Deer Institute to apologize, resolving this grudge." The dignified middle-aged man spoke again. Lung Mao nodded his head as he sighed in his heart. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. If he knew back then that Qin Wentian's talent in divine inscriptions was so high, how could he have forced Lung Ning to commit suicide? Although Qin Wentian had caused a huge wave of commotion in the eastern region of the Moon continent, and his fame had already spread throughout the entire Moon continent, it was as though nothing had happened to him. He was still cultivating in the back mountain of the White Deer Institute. After the death of those fourth-ranked grandmasters, the treasures they left behind naturally became Qin Wentian's. The treasures of these grandmasters were all extremely abundant. There was no need to mention the Yuan meteor stones. The third-ranked divine weapons were tossed around like trash, and there were also many precious materials and medicinal herbs. If all these were exchanged for Yuan meteor stones, it would be sufficient to support Qin Wentian's cultivation for a very long time. If that was the case, he wouldn't even need to go to the Hell Arena to earn Yuan meteor stones. Naturally, the most valuable treasures were still the fourth-ranked puppet, as well as the few fourth-ranked divine weapons. Sadly, the grandmasters he killed had limited attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions, and weren't among the most powerful fourth-ranked grandmasters. Seems like I have to find a place to sell off those things I don't need, and exchange them for the cultivation materials I need, Qin Wentian mused. Boss, do you have any more good stuff? Give me more to play with. Fan Lu, who was at the side, was currently playing with a third-ranked divine weapon. His eyes flickered with a strange light as he instigated Qin Wentian. Forget it. Your cultivation base isn't very high. These few divine weapons are more than enough for you to use. Qin Wentian rolled his eyes. This damnable fatty had already coveted 5 of his top-tier third-ranked divine weapons. Hee, if I could have some fourth-ranked divine weapons to play with, that would be even better. Fan Le grinned, causing Qin Wentian to be speechless. They couldn't even unleash the full power of fourth-ranked divine weapons, and relying too much on them would only be detrimental to their growth. When you step into Heavenly Dipper, I'm afraid I'll be able to easily forge a fourth-ranked divine weapon myself. Why would I be afraid of not having any divine weapons to use? Qin Wentian mocked. Fan Li's eyes flickered. Chu Mang, on the other hand, was extremely quiet. He stood at the side and played with the great axe Qin Wentian had given him. He only chose 2 divine weapons. One was an attack-type great axe, and the other was a divine armor. Sadly, he didn't have a 4th-ranked defensive divine armor. If not, he could have gifted it to Qin as a present. Divine weapons and armors were extremely precious, and not something ordinary 4th-ranked grandmasters would be able to forge. Hence, even the few 4th-ranked grandmasters killed by Qin Wenyan didn't have a single one of them. We're not done yet. From afar, Bai Lu-yi walked over with a smile on her face. All right, is there anyone else looking for me? Qin Wenyan smiled. During this period of time, there were many who came to visit him, but he rejected them all. Not only was he a genius divine inscriptionist, he also had the ancient scroll of the Ascendant in his possession. With regards to foreign powers, it was impossible for him to join them just because he didn't know what they were thinking. Even in the White Deer Institute, wasn't there someone like Bai Lu Tong who wanted to kill him and seize the ancient scroll of the Ascendant? Initially I didn't want to disturb you, but there are a few powers that are a little special, so I had to inform you about them. Bai Lu-yi retrieved a book and passed it to Qin Wenyan. This is a brief introduction to the various powers in Grand Xia. You can try to understand them. Qin Wenyan received the book. He really needed to understand these things. After coming to the Moon continent, other than the 4 transcendent powers, he wasn't very clear about the other powers. Currently, there are 3 powers that have come to pay their respects. The first one is the Star River Association. You should have heard of it before. Bai Lu-yi's words caused Qin Wenyan's countenance to stiffen. He naturally knew of the Star River Association. It existed in the Chu country. In his impression, the Star River Association was extremely mysterious and powerful. Although it was open to the public, it didn't interfere in the affairs of the outside world. However, the power of the Star River Association was extremely terrifying, and no other powers dared to antagonize it. I've heard of it before. In my hometown, there's also a Star River Association. Qin Wenyan replied. Not only did the Star River Association exist in the Chu country, there was also a branch in the Sky Harmony City. The Star River Association is a special power that can be found throughout Grand Xia. Although they appear to be low profile and rarely participate in the affairs of the outside world, their foundations are extremely terrifying. Not only that, they are extremely proficient in recruiting outstanding individuals. Regardless of alchemists, weaponsmiths, or stellar martial cultivators, they would always recruit them in secret. Many people in Grand Xia have speculated that the Star River Association is like a pyramid, with layers upon layers of hierarchy. Their management is extremely strict, and those at the bottom might not have a high status, but they have the opportunity to climb up. As for where the Star River Association originated from, there are rumors saying that they originated from outside the royal capital of Grand Xia. Even the Star River Association in the various cities of Grand Xia are nothing but subordinates of the Star River Association, Bai Lu-yi explained. The Star River Association is actually so powerful. Qin Wenyan was somewhat taken aback. Back in Chu, he had heard rumors that the Star River Association had branches throughout the various cities. And now, the Grand Xia Empire was actually in a similar situation. This level of influence was simply too terrifying, simply too shocking. Maybe the Star River Association in Chu couldn't be considered much, but it was still a pyramid. Just like what Bai Lu-yi had said, the Star River Association was like a pyramid. How terrifying would the people at the top be? There are rumors that the Star River Association has interacted with many rankers on the Heavenly Dipper rankings and Heavenly Fate rankings. In fact, there are even quite a few of them who are honored guests of the Star River Association. Although it's just a nominal title, they still have a connection with the Star River Association. Now that they're here to look for you, it's most likely because they know that you're a 19-year-old 4th-ranked Grandmaster, and they wish to recruit you. Bai Lu-yi's words caused Qin Wenyan to be silently shocked. He didn't have a good impression of the Star River Association. Back then, Murin's despicable actions had almost caused the deaths of many members of his Qin clan. The second power is similarly extraordinary, the Thousand-Ju Alliance. Bai Lu-yi introduced, the Thousand-Ju Alliance is the strongest alliance of unaffiliated cultivators in Grand Xia. Because unaffiliated cultivators are usually alone, They would be at a disadvantage if they were to clash with the major powers. Hence, a few thousand years ago, the Thousand-Ju Alliance was established in Grand Xia by a few extremely powerful unaffiliated cultivators. As long as you contribute enough to the Thousand-Ju Alliance, you'll be able to enjoy a certain level of authority. This is a transcendent power, but they aren't based in the Moon continent. However, there are still some of their people in the Moon continent. I'm afraid they're here to recruit you. Bai Lui continued. As for the third power, it's none other than the Leng clan. Leng Mao is here to apologize and wishes to resolve the grudge between you and him. A cold light flickered in Qin Wentian's eyes. The Leng clan wanted Leng Mao to apologize? How ridiculous! Chapter 291. Not only did Qin Wenin have a cold glint in his eyes, even Fan Lu, who was standing beside him, was instantly engulfed in the flames of hatred. His entire person seemed to explode as the terrifying flames on his body ignited. Fan Le had personally witnessed Leng Ning's death. He would never forget the scene of her being forced to her death by the Leng clan and Yen Tai. Boss, you told me before that this Leng Mao was the one who gave the order, right? Fan Le turned his gaze onto Qin Wenyan. Qin Wenyan nodded his head. I want him to die. I can't accept this. Leng Jian, Leng Lin, they all deserve to die. Fan Li's eyes were bloodshot. This was the first time Qin Wenyan saw such a crazed expression on his face. I heard that the Leng clan has already punished Leng Jian and Leng Lin. Bai Lui continued, the Leng clan should know that Leng Mao was the one who gave the order, hence they sent him here to apologize. Apologize? Fan Le coldly laughed. Back then, not only did he force Leng Ning to her death, he even wanted to kill you, me, and Chu Mang. At that time, you weren't in the Leng clan, hence you were able to escape. Leng Ning sent me out of the Leng clan in advance, saving her life. That's not enough. The Leng clan knows that you are a third-ranked divine inscriptionist. They have no intentions of letting you off. It was Leng Ning who lied to the Leng clan before she died, telling them that you and Bai Lui were in love with each other. This was the reason why the Leng clan didn't dare to act against you. After which, Leng Ning committed suicide. Fan Li's voice was hoarse as he roared in a low voice. Now, is there any use in apologizing? What does all of this count for? What does Leng Ning's death count for? Who? Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath. Hearing Fan Li narrate the details of Leng Ning's death, he couldn't help but think of that pitiful young girl. She shouldn't have died like this. Maybe he didn't have the qualifications to care about the Leng clan, but he was acquainted with Leng Ning. Someone had to be responsible for her death. Definitely. Not only that, he, Chu Mang and Fan Le had no grudges with the Leng clan. Leng Mao had wanted to kill them just to please Yen Tai. How strong is Leng Mao? Qin Wentian asked. Leng Mao is an elder of the Leng clan, and has just broken through to Heavenly Dipper. The Leng clan doesn't want you to bear a grudge against them, hence they chose to deal with Leng Jian and Leng Lin, who aren't that important to the Leng clan. But to deal with a Heavenly Dipper elder, they couldn't bear to do so. Hence, they only came here to apologize, Bai Lui explained. Yes. Qin Wentian nodded. I'll wait for him here. Ask the people of the Leng clan to come with me. Qin Wentian spoke to Bai Lui. Bai Lui inclined her head to look at him before nodding her head and turning away. Not long after, Leng Mao and a few others from the Leng clan arrived. Glancing at Qin Wentian from afar, Leng Mao smiled as he stated, Grandmaster Qin, you're so young yet you're already a fourth-ranked Grandmaster. Your future prospects are limitless. So, Qin Wentian stretched out his hand, pointing to a patch of grass in front of him as he spoke to Leng Mao. Leng Mao walked to a spot not far from Qin Wentian. Shaking his head, he stated, Today I, Leng Mao, have come here to apologize. I won't be sitting. The matter with Leng Ning in the past is something that my Leng clan is ashamed of. Now, I've already dealt with the main culprits, Leng Jian and Leng Lin. If that's the case, I have to thank Senior. Qin Wentian laughed. As though sensing the sarcasm in Qin Wentian's words, Leng Mao bitterly smiled. I was forced to do so. I hope Grandmaster Qin won't hold it against me. Today, I'm here with sincerity. This interspatial ring contains a small token of my Leng clan's sincerity. Qin Wendian didn't accept the ring, he merely snorted coldly. Lung Mao continued, "If Grandmaster Qin is still dissatisfied, feel free to let me know if you have any requests. In my Lung clan, other than Ling Ning, there are still a few other beauties that are more outstanding than her. If Grandmaster Qin is interested, you can choose one of them to be your concubine." This again. This Ling Mao had completely treated the women of his clan as sacrificial pawns. As long as they were in line with his interests, they could be sacrificed. After all, in the martialist continent, the status of women in major clans was lower than that of men. The more talented the men were, the more they would be able to bring glory to the clan, while the women would often be married off to other clans. The exception was if there were some extremely outstanding women, the clan would choose a son-in-law for them to marry into their clan. In major clans, many women were sacrificed for marriage alliances. Qin Wenyin was already a fourth-ranked grandmaster at such a young age. If he could improve his relationship with Lung Mao, it would definitely be worth it. "I do have a request, but I'm not sure if Senior would agree." Qin Wendian laughed. Lung Mao laughed. "Grandmaster Qin, feel free to speak. I want you to die." As the sound of Qin Wentian's voice faded, he abruptly stood up. Abruptly, the entire ground lit up as the terrifying glow of divine inscriptions enveloped the entire area. A surge of sword chi swept through the air. Qin Wenyin had already repaired the sword's cyclone tempest, and as he soared into the air, boundless sword chi enveloped him. The faces of those behind Lung Mao turned ashen, while Lung Mao coldly stared at Qin Wenyin. "As expected of a fourth-ranked grandmaster, your divine inscriptions are indeed powerful. However, if the White Deer Institute wants to kill me, it wouldn't be too appropriate." Although divine inscriptions of this level could cause him some trouble, as long as the people from the White Deer Institute didn't act, they wouldn't be able to threaten his life. Qin Wenyin waved his palms, and in an instant, 2 fourth-ranked puppets and 5 peak-level third-ranked puppets appeared in the air, hovering above Lung Mao. Their cold gazes caused the scalps of those who saw them to go numb. "This matter has nothing to do with the White Deer Institute. The people you brought here will naturally report back." The killing intent in Qin Wentian's voice intensified. "You are the one who gave the order, how can you still be alive?" As the sound of Qin Wentian's voice faded, the puppets all lunged forward. These puppets were his spoils of war, and he had already refined them, allowing them to carry out his will. With a wave of his hand, a terrifying gigantic sword slashed out, while the sword's cyclone tempest also swept towards Lung Mao. Lung Mao paled. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that even without the help of the White Deer Institute, Qin Wenyin would still have such terrifying strength. There were 2 fourth-ranked puppets among the puppets, and they were more than enough to trap him here. "Grandmaster Qin, we can discuss this further." Lung Mao's astral nova whistled out, colliding with the sword puppet. Lung Mao was completely suppressed, he could only condense a single astral nova. The terrifying finger light from the golden armored puppet shot towards him, lacerating everything in its path. The other peak-tier third-ranked puppets also took this opportunity to launch their own attacks, and in addition to the sword's cyclone tempest, Lung Mao had no time to deal with them. "Lung Mao, maybe you didn't care about Lung Ning's death back then, and that's why that order wasn't even worth mentioning to you. However, there's someone who cares. Hence, you shall be buried together with Lung Ning." Fan Lu, who was outside the formation, roared in rage. Lung Mao, who had collided with the golden armored puppet, had no way to defend against the sword's cyclone tempest, and his body was directly pierced through. "Spare me!" Lung Mao screamed. However, the golden armored puppet's fist slammed into his chest, and the terrifying force of the impact caused Lung Mao's body to be on the verge of breaking apart. A burst of sword chi whistled past, instantly tearing Lung Mao's body apart. Below, the members of the Lung clan watched on with trepidation, their hearts pounding. Elder Lung Mao had died. This young, fourth-ranked grandmaster was truly terrifying. With just a thought, he could kill them all. However, at this moment, the tempest gradually subsided. The golden armored puppets hovering in the air caused their hearts to tremble. Qin Wenyin slowly walked over, and with a wave of his hand, a list of names appeared in his hands. Lung Ning was someone from the Lung clan. Maybe some of you know her. She was ruthlessly forced to her death by Lung Mao's order, and I don't wish for the innocent to die because of this. Since the Lung clan didn't want to punish the main culprit, Lung Mao, I killed him myself. Other than Lung Jian and Lung Lin, there are a few others who participated in this matter. Qin Wenyan coldly stated, "You guys can go back and report." The members of the Lung clan felt as though they had been pardoned from a great crime. Watching them depart, Qin Wenyan inclined his head and gazed at the drifting clouds in the sky as he murmured, "Lung Ning, I believe that the kind-hearted you wouldn't wish for the innocent to die. For every grievance, there must be a perpetrator, and for every debt, there must be a debtor. Those who caused your death will definitely pay with their lives. If the Lung clan continues to act this way, it would only be a matter of time before they die." Fan Lu also gazed at the skies, hoping that Lung Ning would be able to rest in peace. "Let's go and meet with the people from the Star River Association first." Qin Wendian spoke to Bai Lu. He had no idea how deep the foundations of this mysterious and powerful power were, but he wanted to see what the Star River Association wanted to do. "Okay." Bai Lu nodded as she led Qin Wendian away. They came to a courtyard in the academy, where the people from the Star River Association were arranged to rest. "Junior is late, please forgive me." Qin Wenyan saw that there were many people in the courtyard, and his gaze soon landed on a middle-aged man sitting on a stone chair. This middle-aged man had a calm demeanor, and when he saw Qin Wenyan, a sharp glint of sharpness flashed in his eyes. But very quickly, it dissipated into nothingness as he smiled at Qin Wenyan. "Grandmaster Qin is too polite. You are indeed as young as the rumors say, a genius, an absolute genius. Senior praises me too much." Qin Wendian smiled as he sat down on a stone chair. "Senior, why have you come to look for me?" "Since Grandmaster Qin has asked, I will speak frankly." The middle-aged man smiled. "I'm the weaponsmith hall master of the Moon Continent's Star River Association. I heard of Grandmaster Qin's talent in divine inscriptions, and wish to invite you to join our weaponsmith hall. I can directly appoint you as the vice leader of our weaponsmith hall. How about it?" When Qin Wenyan heard this, he understood that the Star River Association in the various regions were all very similar. The Star River Association here also had a weaponsmithing hall. Most probably, this vice hall master had only given him this position because of his potential. "Senior, Qin, am afraid to accept your invitation. It's just that this junior has no interest in weaponsmithing. Hence, I can only apologize." Qin Wendian smiled. The Star River Association was a mysterious place, and the hierarchy was extremely strict. He naturally didn't want to be tied down by the Star River Association. However, with regards to such a powerful existence, if he didn't even meet with them, it would be too disrespectful. Hence, he could only tactfully reject. "Grandmaster Qin, are you not going to consider it? The position of vice leader of the Weaponsmith Hall is a position that many fourth-ranked divine inscriptionists yearn for. Grandmaster Qin has just stepped into the fourth-ranked divine inscriptionist realm, yet the Star River Association is already giving you such a position." An old man at the side, who seemed to be an inscriptionist proficient in weaponsmithing, persuaded Qin Wenyan. "I, Qin, can't force myself to do something I'm not interested in. I can only thank you for your kind intentions." Qin Wendian continued to reject. The middle-aged man could only smile when he saw that Qin Wendian had no intentions of considering. "In that case, is Grandmaster Qin willing to become a guest elder of our Star River Association? In the future, we can always keep in touch, and you can also enjoy certain benefits." Guest elder again. Qin Wenyan involuntarily thought back to the time when Murin had lied to him. The position of guest elder had no meaning to him, and he didn't want to have any entanglements with the Star River Association. Hence, he could only reject again. "This junior is used to living a carefree life. I won't take up the position of a guest elder of the Star River Association." Qin Wendian rejected again. How could these people from the Star River Association not understand Qin Wentian's meaning? They could only reply, "Since this is the case, we will take our leave. Seniors, please take care." Qin Wenin clasped his hands as he saw the other party standing up, a faint smile on his face. Chapter 292. After the people from the Star River Association left, Bai Lu-yi stared at Qin Wenin with a smile that was not a smile on her face, causing Qin Wenin to have a look of bewilderment on his face as he teased, "Am I really that good-looking?" The Star River Association is extremely mysterious. Those who are able to receive their invitation are all geniuses with great potential. And this time around, the leader of the weaponsmithing branch of the Star River Association personally came to invite you. This can be considered as giving you a lot of face. Bai Lu-yi's eyes flashed with a brilliant light as she stared at Qin Wenin. Back then, when Qin Wenin was acquainted with Qin Wenin, he had snuck into the White Deer Institute to learn divine inscriptions from her. Who would have thought that in such a short period of time, Qin Wenin would have already reached such a level? How astonishing! The leader of the weaponsmithing branch of the Star River Association personally came to invite him, yet he was rejected. How could you reject him so decisively without even considering it? I'm afraid the leader of the Star River Association would feel that he has lost face. Bai Lu-yi bitterly smiled as she shook her head. Although Qin Wenin had already tactfully rejected, it was still a little too direct. I don't want to have too much to do with this power. Qin Wenin casually shrugged his shoulders. In this world, one shouldn't worry too much about everything. It was too tiring to consider even the smallest of matters. As a person, there was no need to be so accommodating. Ultimately, he would still do things according to his heart. He didn't have a good impression of the Star River Association. Maybe it was unreasonable for him to vent his anger on the Star River Association because of what happened in Chu. But in this world, how could one be so rational? If he liked something, he liked it. If he didn't like it, he didn't like it. Fine, let's go meet the members of the Thousand Jew Alliance. I wonder why you have such an opinion of the Star River Association. Bai Lu-yi smiled as she brought Qin Wenin to another manor, where the people of the Thousand Jew Alliance were already waiting. Both parties naturally exchanged a few more pleasantries before they got down to business. Grandmaster Qin, I'm sure you've already guessed the reason why I'm here. The Thousand Jew Alliance is divided into the Inner League and Outer League. The Inner League is the strength of the Thousand Jew Alliance and exists in the form of a sect. As for the Outer League, they are the guest elders. Only those with extraordinary abilities would be invited by the Thousand Jew Alliance. Opposite to Qin Wenin was a woman. She was middle-aged but still had her charm. She looked very capable and experienced, and when she spoke, she made people feel close to her. Qin Wenin nodded his head lightly when he heard Qin Wentian's words. It was very easy to understand the difference between the Inner and Outer League. The Inner League was the strength of the Thousand Jew Alliance, similar to the Pill Emperor Hall of the Star-Seizing Manor. There was a strict hierarchy, and the juniors of the younger generation had to obey the orders of their elders. But for the Outer League, the Thousand Jew Alliance wouldn't intentionally nurture them, nor could they order them to do anything. The Thousand Jew Alliance had already investigated and found out that Qin Wenin didn't belong to any sect and didn't belong to the White Deer Institute. It seemed that he only had a romantic relationship with Bai Lu-yi. This was what many in the White Deer Institute thought. Grandmaster Qin, if you are willing to join the Inner League of our Thousand Jew Alliance, you will naturally be nurtured as a core disciple. But if you join the Outer League, you will be directly promoted to a 5th Jew Guest Elder and enjoy the privileges of a 5th Jew Guest Elder without any restrictions. The woman smiled at Qin Wenin. Her smile was extremely clean, causing people to feel comfortable in their hearts. It was indeed very suitable for such a character to act as a middleman for the Thousand Jew Alliance. Bai Lu-yi, who was standing at the side, felt her heart trembling slightly. After Qin Wenin became a 4th-ranked Grandmaster, the Thousand Jew Alliance had indeed attracted a lot of attention. The foundations of the Thousand Jew Alliance were weaker compared to the other transcendent powers, hence they placed more emphasis on recruiting talents. And now, for the sake of Qin Wenin, they were willing to directly give him the position of a 5th Jew Guest Elder. Bai Lu-yi knew that there were 9 levels of Guest Elders in the Thousand Jew Alliance. The first level was the lowest, while the 9th level was the highest. Those at the first level were juniors with more potential. Those at the second level were those with outstanding talent. Those at the third level were those with a certain level of fame. Those at the fourth level were only those who were able to step into the heavenly fate rankings. And as for the fifth Jew guest elders, only heavenly Dipper sovereigns had the qualifications to converse with heavenly Dipper sovereigns of the Thousand Jew Alliance and enjoy a lot of authority. As for the sixth Jew guest elders, it wasn't just a matter of having sufficient potential or strength. They had to have made great contributions to the Thousand Jew Alliance, and the sixth Jew guest elders even had the authority to mobilize heavenly Dipper sovereigns of the Thousand Jew Alliance for help. The status of a seventh Jew guest elder was already exceedingly high. A ninth Jew guest elder was also known as a Thousand Jew guest elder. They had the qualifications to converse with the Thousand Jew Alliance leader, and the authority they wielded was already comparable to the peak characters of the Thousand Jew Alliance. And now, the Thousand Jew Alliance directly gave Qin Wenyan the title of a fifth Jew guest elder. This was equivalent to having the highest authority. No restrictions? Qin Wenyan smiled as his eyes shone with a bright light. Nope. The lady shook her head as she smiled. Our Thousand Jew Alliance was formed by an alliance of unaffiliated cultivators. Our foundation is slightly weaker compared to some of the transcendent powers, but it's precisely because of our recruitment of talents that we have grown stronger and stronger to the point where we can contend against the other transcendent powers. Naturally, we have to give them sufficient respect, and as for outstanding talents, the Thousand Jew Alliance will provide assistance without any restrictions. Qin Wenyan smiled and nodded his head. This was indeed an extremely tempting offer. Naturally, let me make this clear first. Below the fifth Jew guest elders, including the fifth Jew guest elders, the Thousand Jew Alliance will provide you with some authority, for example, to gather information, to purchase treasures, etc. But because there are no restrictions, if a guest elder were to be hunted down by experts, our Thousand Jew Alliance will not provide any reinforcements. That's only natural. Qin Wenyan nodded his head. How ridiculous would it be to enjoy some authority and still want others to protect him? However, it's different for a sixth Jew guest elder. Because a sixth Jew guest elder would have to make a certain amount of contributions to the Thousand Jew Alliance before they can be promoted. Hence, a sixth Jew guest elder would be able to request for assistance from a heavenly Dipper sovereign of the Thousand Jew Alliance. If it's a seventh Jew guest elder, they can directly mobilize a heavenly Dipper sovereign of an area. The middle-aged lady smiled. I accept. As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Wenyan laughed. There were only benefits to this. He couldn't find any reason to reject. Grandmaster Qin is indeed straightforward. The lady smiled, after which she took out a command token with the words Fifth Jew engraved on it. After which she reminded, Grandmaster Qin, there's one thing I have to ask Grandmaster Qin to remember. This command token can only be used by the owner of the token. If we discover that someone is impersonating the owner of the token, the Thousand Jew Alliance will act according to the situation. In fact, we might even kill the imposter on the spot. I understand. Qin Wenyan nodded his head. This was probably because they were worried that if a guest elder of the Thousand Jew Alliance died, the medallion would fall into the hands of others. If that was the case, things would be even more chaotic. Since that's the case, I shall return to report the completion of the mission. Grandmaster Qin would definitely be extremely happy to be a guest elder of our Thousand Jew Alliance. The words of the middle-aged lady were extremely pleasing to the ears. Qin Wenyan and Bailu Yi stood up to send her off. Qin Wenyan held the Thousand Jew medallion in his hands as a smile appeared on his face. There was something he wanted to do. The reason why he came to the moon continent was precisely because of this. Kill Hua Xiaoyan. Back then, in the Mo clan of Chu, Hua Xiaoyan dared to do such despicable things to Mo Qingqing, causing her to commit suicide. This matter was like a thorn in Qin Wenyan's heart. Not only that, he didn't even have the chance to bid farewell to Mo Qingqing. Mo Qingqing had already left Chu, arriving at the Pill Emperor Hall. Although the Pill Emperor Hall was just a few feet away from him, it was extremely difficult for him to even meet her. Mo Qingqing must have suffered a heavy blow as well. Now, he didn't even know how she was doing. If Hua Xiaoyan didn't die, He would never be able to rest in peace. Just when Qin Wenyan wanted to kill Hua Xiaoyun, how could Hua Xiaoyun not want to kill him, Qin Wenyan? In a certain inn, Hua Xiaoyun crushed the wine cup in his hand into dust. Because he heard a name in the inn, Qin Wenyan. These 3 words were exceptionally ear-piercing to the ears. Instantly, an ice-cold killing intent gushed forth from Hua Xiaoyun, causing those in the surroundings to retreat far away from him. Hua Xiaoyun naturally hated Qin Wenyan. Once, he was the second-generation ancestor of the Hua clan, able to do whatever he wanted. However, a single trip to Chu had almost caused him to be consigned to eternal damnation. One of his arms was severed by Qin Wenyan, and after he returned, this matter caused a huge commotion. After that, as Emo Qingqing's status rose higher and higher in the Pill Emperor Hall, the elders of the Hua clan almost didn't hand him over to Emo Qingqing to be punished. The Hua clan wanted his elder brother, Hua Taishu, to marry Emo Qingqing, but the things Hua Taishu had done in the past had become a thorn in their side. If it weren't for the fact that he was Hua Taishu's younger brother, he would have been in an extremely miserable state. But even so, he was still in a miserable state. His status in the Hua clan had plummeted to the point where he couldn't even command the more powerful members of the Hua clan. Only his parents had left him a heavenly dipper sovereign to act as his bodyguard. After the outsiders learned of this, they all looked down on him and severed all ties with him. How could Hua Xiaoyun not see through all these changes? His current situation could only be described with one word: miserable. And now, upon hearing the name of Qin Wenyan, one could only imagine the killing intent in his heart. Qin Wenyan and Hua Xiaoyun at the same time, despite the vast distance between them, both had an intense killing intent towards each other. Qin Wenyan, a 4th-ranked grandmaster? I really want to see if he's that Qin Wenyan. A cold, killing intent flickered in Hua Xiaoyun's eyes as he stood up and walked out of the inn. "Young master, where are we going?" one of the guards asked. "The Shadow Pavilion," Hua Xiaoyun coldly replied, his words causing the countenance of his guard to stiffen. "Why are we going to the Shadow Pavilion?" the guard asked curiously. "I'm here to gather information about a certain person. If the information is accurate, I'll kill him," Hua Xiaoyun coldly stated. Even Qin Wenyan himself didn't expect that at the same time he wanted to kill Hua Xiaoyun, Qin Wenyan also wanted to kill him. Qin Wenyan arrived at the foot of the Pill Emperor Hall. At this moment, Qin Wenyan was clad in white. Inclining his head, he stared at the heavily guarded Pill Emperor Hall, as well as the towering Pill Emperor Hall. A gust of wind blew past, causing Qin Wentian's white robes to flutter, tugging at the heartstrings of his heart. Beauty was one of them. However, when would he be able to see her? Within the Pill Emperor Hall, the silhouettes of 2 youths walked out. As they neared, their gazes inadvertently landed on Qin Wenyan, and they couldn't help but be stunned. After which, a complicated expression flickered in their eyes. These 2 were none other than Jingyu and Yan Qi, who had accompanied Luo He to Chu back then. To think that they would actually see a genius from a small country. To think that he had overestimated his own capabilities, chasing after her all the way to the Pill Emperor Hall. As to why their expressions were so complicated, it was because the current Emo Qingqing was so lofty that they could only look up to her in admiration. Not to mention, this minor character from the Chu country had such a look of disdain in his eyes. What an infatuated idiot! However, what could they do? The jackdaw was destined to never be in the same league as the Luan and Phoenix. Chapter 293. Jingyu and Yan Qi walked to the front of Qin Wenyan, scrutinizing him. Because of Qin Wentian's transformation, although they were facing Qin Wenyan, they only felt that there was a slight resemblance, but they didn't dare to confirm it. And now, standing in front of Qin Wenyan, scrutinizing him, they finally confirmed that this was indeed the young man from Chu. As men, back then when they first met Emo Qingqing, they already had a trace of admiration in their hearts. Hence, they felt a trace of enmity towards Qin Wenyan and remembered him even more clearly. As for Bai Fei, because she had never looked at Qin Wenyan directly, her impression of Qin Wenyan wasn't as deep as Jingyu and Yan Qi. "So it's really you?" Hints of mockery could be seen flickering in their eyes. Qin Wenyin naturally noticed them as well, but he only casually swept a glance at them before continuing his gaze ahead. Return to Chu, this isn't a place you should be at. Jing Yu calmly spoke. There was no insult, no contempt, he was merely trying to persuade Qin Wenyin. If it was in the past, he might have insulted Qin Wenyin. But now, in front of Mo Qingqing, he could only raise his head in admiration. What qualifications did he have to humiliate Qin Wenyin? Wasn't there some similarities between him and Qin Wenyin? Qin Wenyin didn't look at Jing Yu. In the world of cultivation, the hierarchy was extremely strict. Every level higher could cause one to collapse. And the Pill Emperor Hall stood at the pinnacle of the Moon continent, just like the Great Hall in front of them. The pressure it exerted was so great that it was difficult to even breathe. However, his gaze was extremely calm. No matter how high the Great Hall was, there would always be people who could trample it beneath their feet. Infatuation also depends on who you are looking at. If you know it's impossible, why place your hopes on her? The difference between you and her in the past is too great. Jing Yu continued. These words seemed to be directed at Qin Wenyin, but also seemed to be a warning to himself. Upon seeing that Qin Wenyin didn't seem to have heard Jing Yu's words, Yan Qi couldn't help but to laugh coldly. Walking towards Qin Wenyin, he stared at him with disdain as he stated, "The Pill Emperor Hall has a total of 99 flights of steps. Even the person standing at the bottom of the flight of steps is someone you have to look up to, yet you are still daydreaming here. Let me remind you again out of goodwill, scram. If not, if you dare to profane her, the consequences will be something you won't be able to bear." Qin Wenyin turned around slowly and looked at Yan Qi. A golden bolt of lightning suddenly appeared in his eyes and pierced through Yan Qi's eyes. Boom! Yan Qi only felt his mind trembling violently. It was as though a primordial beast was brandishing its terrifying claws, wanting to tear him into pieces. Just a single gaze from Qin Wenyin caused him to involuntarily retreat a few steps. His countenance paled as beads of perspiration appeared on his forehead. An overwhelming aura gushed forth from his body as he stared at Qin Wenyin, only to see Qin Wenyin shifting his gaze away. It was as though Qin Wenyin wasn't looking at him at all. This caused Yan Qi's countenance to turn ashen. He had actually been frightened by a single gaze from Qin Wenyin. How could this be? Jing Yu also noticed Yan Qi's abnormality. His eyes flickered, but at this moment, a sharp glint of light shot towards them from behind. Yan Qi and Jing Yu both turned their gazes over, only to see a scholarly and refined silhouette. Their eyes instantly flickered with a hint of respect. It was their senior brother Zhan Qin, ranked number 11 on the Heavenly Fate rankings. If there was someone in the Pill Emperor Hall who was worthy of Mo Qingqing, it would definitely be their senior brother Zhan Qin. As Zhan Qin walked over, Jing Yu and Yan Qi hurriedly gave way to him. When they looked at Zhan Qin, a hint of respect flashed in their eyes as they greeted, "Senior brother." Zhan Qin lightly nodded his head. His gaze was fixated on Qin Wenyin, and Qin Wenyin was also looking at him. The killing intent of a character ranked number 11 on the Heavenly Fate rankings hadn't lessened in the slightest. Zhan Qin was somewhat bewildered. He didn't know why Qin Wenyin would come to the Pill Emperor Hall. Back then when his secret was exposed by Qin Wenyin, he had always harbored killing intent towards Qin Wenyin. Now that Qin Wenyin had come to the Pill Emperor Hall, how could he not be on guard? However, Zhan Qin wasn't afraid that Qin Wenyin would reveal the truth. If Qin Wenyin dared to say it, he would definitely deny it outright and spare no expense to kill Qin Wenyin. After all, in the Pill Emperor Hall he still had some prestige. This point, Qin Wenyin should also understand. Hence, he wouldn't dare to reveal the truth so easily. The moment he did, between the two of them, one of them would have to die. And the one who would die would naturally be Qin Wenyin. Although Qin Wenyin stood there calmly, there were hints of wariness in his heart. This Zhan Qin might appear to be a scholarly person, but he was extremely good at disguising himself. Now that his strength was inferior to Zhan Qin's, he naturally had to be wary of this person. "I just heard that you caused quite a commotion in the Eastern Domain," Zhan Qin laughed, as though he and Qin Wenyin were good friends who hadn't seen each other for a very long time. Qin Wenyin met his gaze calmly, but he didn't reply. At this moment, A terrifying aura gushed forth from Zhang Chen's body, as a fearsome sword intent bore down on Qin Wenyan, wanting to penetrate through his body. But what are you doing here in the Pill Emperor Hall? As the sound of Zhang Chen's voice faded, he took a step forward. This step instantly caused an immense pressure to weigh down on Qin Wenyan, as though with a single thought, he would kill Qin Wenyan on the spot. If you take another step forward, I can guarantee that you will regret it. Qin Wenyan spoke in an indifferent tone, as light as the wind and as light as the clouds. His calm voice caused the hearts of Jingyu and Yan Qi to tremble. Qin Wenyan actually dared to speak such arrogant words to their senior brother Zhang Chen? Not only that, it was obvious that Zhang Chen was acquainted with Qin Wenyan, and the two of them had a grudge. Zhang Chen halted his steps. Up till now, Qin Wenyan hadn't revealed his secret, because even if he did, it wouldn't be of any use. On the contrary, it would only make Zhang Chen pay any price to kill him. However, if he forced Qin Wenyan too far, there was no doubt that Qin Wenyan would reveal his secret without hesitation. Although not many would believe it, it would be sufficient to heavily damage Zhang Chen's reputation. And once someone in the Pill Emperor Hall suspected him, his reputation would be severely damaged. Hence, unless he could kill Qin Wenyan before Qin Wenyan spoke, he wouldn't take the risk. Not only that, Bai Lui had also heard the conversation. Retracting his aura, Zhang Chen smiled. I forgot that you've already become the youngest fourth-ranked grandmaster in the Moon continent. Your attitude has indeed changed. However, divine inscriptions are still divine inscriptions. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't even need 5 breaths of time. Remember to be more careful in the future. Even though it was a threat, Zhang Chen still spoke with a smile on his face. Jingyu and Yan Qi felt their hearts trembling. Qin Wenyan was the youngest fourth-ranked grandmaster in the Moon continent? What was going on? A minor character from Chu back then, why did even their senior brother Zhang Chen suddenly feel trepidation towards him? I heard that there's a huge gap between the Yuanfu realm and Heavenly Dipper realm. I hope you can cross this gap as soon as possible, Qin Wenyan calmly stated to Zhang Chen. If you stay at the Yuanfu realm for too long, I'm afraid that when you meet me in the future, you will have to avoid me. After speaking, Qin Wenyan slowly turned and walked away with his back facing Zhang Chen. A terrifying sword intent abruptly gushed forth, yet Qin Wenyan continued walking forward calmly, with his back facing Zhang Chen. He had no fear, or rather, disregard for Qin Wenyan. A terrifying light flickered in Zhang Chen's eyes as the sword intent radiating from him gradually dissipated. His silhouette also gradually disappeared from sight. Jingyu and Yan Qi, who were standing at the side, were dumbfounded as they watched this scene unfold. Qin Wenyan actually dared to speak to their senior brother Zhang Chen in such a manner? That young man from a small country didn't even bother to look at them. Are you guys acquainted with him? Zhang Chen indifferently asked. Yes, he's from Chu and had a very good relationship with junior sister Qingqing. Today, I'm afraid he's here because of her. Jingyu didn't say that they were lovers, but Zhang Chen understood. The light in his eyes grew even sharper. Don't tell Qingqing. Zhang Chen calmly stated. Mo Qingqing had always been cultivating in the Pill Emperor Hall and didn't really care about the matters of the outside world. Zhang Chen hoped that she would never know of Qin Wentian's existence until he died. After Qin Wenyan left the Pill Emperor Hall, he arrived at the branch of the Thousand-Ju Alliance in the Moon continent. Upon seeing the Thousand-Ju token of Qin Wentian, someone immediately reported to him. Very quickly, the charming young lady personally came out to receive him. Grandmaster Qin, you came so quickly. Upon seeing Qin Wentian, a warm smile appeared in her eyes. I wish to seek help from the Thousand-Ju Alliance. Qin Wenyan smiled. The other party nodded. You are a guest elder of the Fifth Ju Alliance. As long as you have the authority, the Thousand-Ju Alliance will help you unconditionally. Qin Wenyan nodded as he retrieved a list of items and passed it to the other party. I need the items on this list. How many Yuan meteor stones do you need? I will pay for it. Okay, leave it to me. After the matter is settled, I will order my men to send it to the White Deer Institute. You can then pay him the Yuan meteor stones. The young lady glanced at the items on the list before keeping them. Okay, in addition, I still need to inquire about a certain person, Qin Wenyan spoke as he moved his lips to the side of the young lady's ear, whispering in a low voice, Hua Xiaoyun. A strange light flashed in the eyes of the young lady as she nodded her head. Don't worry, the request of a guest elder of the Thousand Jew Alliance is absolutely confidential. I will handle this matter personally. Many thanks for your help. If there are any expenses incurred, I will bear them myself. Qin Wendian smiled. If he wanted to ask for help, he would have to bear the expenses himself. No need, just provide the information and the Thousand Jew Alliance will bear the expenses. The young lady smiled. Qin Wendian didn't insist, he bade farewell and left the place. At the same time, Hua Xiaoyun, whom Qin Wendian had inquired about, appeared at the mysterious shadow tower in the moon continent. Within the shadow tower, the person sitting opposite to Hua Xiaoyun was flipping through a stack of documents. Since Qin Wendian came from a foreign land, it would be somewhat troublesome to investigate him. However, Hua Xiaoyun had provided them with a clue. Sir, over here. The person sitting opposite to Hua Xiaoyun flipped through the documents as his eyes gradually brightened. Qin Wendian hails from Chu. Qin Wendian hails from Chu. The last time he revealed his cultivation base was during the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions. At that time, he was only at the 3rd level of Yuanfu. Now, he might have already broken through to the 4th level of Yuanfu. He's a 4th-ranked Grandmaster and has a Heavenly Dipper Sovereign protecting him. At the same time, he acquired 2 4th-ranked puppets and killed several 4th-ranked Grandmasters in the White Deer Institute. Not long ago, he also killed Lung Mao from the Lung clan using his divine inscriptions and puppets. The sinister-looking man sitting opposite to Hua Xiaoyun slowly explained, his words causing Hua Xiaoyun's countenance to sink as his countenance turned incredibly unsightly to behold. Coming from Chu, and having a Heavenly Dipper Sovereign protecting him, there was no doubt about it. But now, he had already become a 4th-ranked Grandmaster, and even had a 4th-ranked puppet. I want him dead, Hua Xiaoyun coldly stated. The sinister-looking man laughed, please wait a moment. After which, he left the room for a few moments, and when he returned, he passed a piece of paper to Hua Xiaoyun. You can accept the mission, this is the remuneration you need. 10% upfront, no refunds. After the mission is completed, you can pay the remaining 90%. Hua Xiaoyun glanced at the paper as his countenance stiffened. Is there a need to pay such a high price to kill a Yuanfu cultivator? Young Master Hua, you can do it yourself. The sinister-looking man laughed, causing Hua Xiaoyun's countenance to turn incredibly ugly. Now that his status in the Hua clan had fallen, if he directly sent people to kill Qin Wendian, the Hua clan would definitely not agree. After all, no matter what, Qin Wendian was Mo Qingqing's lover. Who knew what Mo Qingqing's attitude would be? Unless, of course, his elder brother Hua Taishu wanted Qin Wendian dead. I agree. Hua Xiaoyun gritted his teeth as he retrieved a large amount of Yuan meteor stones from his interspatial ring. His heart ached in pain. If he killed Qin Wendian, he would have to expend all the money he had accumulated over the years. After Hua Xiaoyun left, a cold glint of light flashed in the eyes of the sinister-looking man as he laughed. I heard that Qin Wendian rejected the goodwill of the weaponsmith hall not long ago. If not for that, we wouldn't have dared to touch him. Chapter 294. The mission hall of the Shadow Tower was divided into 9 levels. If one wanted to enter the top level, they would need to have the appropriate authority. Because, other than the Shadow Tower's own power, many of the assassins were hired from outside. In other words, anyone could become an assassin of the Shadow Tower. The relationship between them and the Shadow Tower was purely a cooperative one. This was also the reason why the Shadow Tower was so powerful. Many people needed wealth, so they chose to become assassins to earn it. However, there was a flaw to this. Sometimes, the information of the mission would be leaked out. Although the possibility of this was small, it was still unavoidable. However, the Shadow Tower didn't seem to care. Since they dared to become an assassin, they naturally wouldn't be afraid of revenge. Naturally, the Shadow Tower had another rule. They wouldn't accept missions to kill the direct descendants of the transcendent powers. As for the other missions, they would accept them. The 5th level of the mission hall could only be accessed by 5-star assassins. This was a mission for those at the initial level of Heavenly Dipper. Those who could accept missions here were all extremely powerful characters. Today, there was an additional mission on the 5th floor of the mission hall, which was quite eye-catching. Qin Wenin, 19 years old, from Chu, cultivation base at the 3rd or 4th level of Yuanfu, a 4th-ranked Grandmaster. Protected by a 2nd-level Heavenly Dipper female protector, as well as 2 4th-ranked puppets with combat prowess at the initial level of Heavenly Dipper. At the back of the mission, there was a portrait as well as the reward. This must be the youngest 4th-ranked Grandmaster in the Moon continent. This is the first time I've seen someone at the Yuanfu realm worth so much. A person wearing a mask said with a faint smile. Most of the people who came here would not show their faces to others. This way, when accepting a mission, if they killed someone with a background, it would not spread out and they would not be hunted down by the background of the person who killed them. What kind of hatred does this person have? Why would he pay such a huge price to kill a genius Grandmaster? Many of the assassins were bewildered, but they didn't care too much. They were here to see if there were any suitable missions for them to accept. I'll accept this mission. A silhouette walked up and tore down the mission sheet. He stared at the portrait of Qin Wenin as though he was looking at a huge fortune. Tianken, can the 4 of you do it? Someone immediately knew his code name upon seeing the insignia in the silhouette's hands. The assassin, Tianken, was a group of 4 people, not just one. It was said that there were 4 master and disciples, a husband and wife with 2 disciples. They were all very ruthless and had killed many people. Killing someone with a cultivation base at most at the 4th level of Yuanfu? What's the big deal? This fortune is mine for sure. A look of disdain flashed in Tianken's eyes. Behind him stood 3 people. 2 of them laughed out loud. Master, after this mission, we can buy a defensive armor for Master's wife. Yes, it's more than enough. At that time, I'll give each of you a 4th-ranked divine weapon. The hunchbacked figure grinned, as though he could already see the divine weapons in front of him. After all, a Yuanfu cultivator was different from a Heavenly Dipper sovereign. As long as he and his wife could delay the Heavenly Dipper sovereign and the puppet, his 2 disciples could easily kill Qin Wenin. This mission would be difficult for other assassins to complete alone, but with the 4 of them working together, it was easy. This time around, he would be able to earn a huge sum of money. He didn't know who would be so generous as to pay such a hefty price just to kill a Grandmaster with limitless potential. Naturally, Qin Wenin didn't know that his name had already been written in the mission hall of the Shadow Pavilion. He also didn't know that the mission had already been accepted by someone else. After returning to the White Deer Institute, he quietly waited for news from the Thousand-Ju Alliance while simultaneously cultivating one of the powerful innate techniques recorded in the ancient scroll of the Ascendant. Qin Wentian's will seeped into the ancient scroll, and an extremely shocking scene appeared before his eyes. A silhouette stood proudly in the air. About 100 meters away from him, there was a terrifying ancient mountain peak. The silhouette pointed a finger forward, and the tip of his finger seemed to be cast from gold. Instantly, the entire heavens and earth turned golden, as the entire space was enveloped by the mandate of gold. In the entire world, it was as though that finger was the only thing left in the world. Pointing at the mountain peak ahead, an endless amount of golden energy was gathered in that finger. The finger light streaked across and landed on the mountain peak. Cracking sounds rang out as the entire mountain peak was instantly turned into golden shards that scattered across the world. Heaven-breaking finger, cultivate the gold element ancient scroll, cultivate the indestructible golden body, then cultivate this innate technique, breaking the heavens with a single finger. This was the voice left behind by the innate technique, causing Qin Wenin to be extremely shocked. However, this voice also mentioned the gold element ancient scroll that he had abandoned. The more the other party mentioned it, the more suspicious Qin Wenin felt. I don't believe that if I don't cultivate the gold element ancient scroll, I won't be able to cultivate the heaven-breaking finger. A sharp glint of light flashed in Qin Wentian's eyes. This heaven-breaking finger was most probably a heaven-ranked innate technique. The stronger one's cultivation base was, the deeper their comprehension would be, and the more terrifying the might they could unleash. With a single finger of the gold element ancient scroll, an ancient mountain was shattered. The aura it exuded caused Qin Wentian's heart to tremble. This was definitely the most powerful innate technique he had ever seen in his entire life. The heaven-breaking finger didn't mention that one had to cultivate the mandate of gold. In that case, he could cultivate the mandate of demonic energy. The mandate of demonic energy was tyrannical and tyrannical. The might it could unleash was equally terrifying. As he thought of this, Qin Wentian closed his eyes and started to cultivate the tyrannical heaven-breaking finger art. After cultivating for a short period of time, Qin Wentian discovered that every time he activated the heaven-breaking finger art, the amount of astral energy he had to expend was as vast as the ocean. If he used his divine energy to unleash the heaven-breaking finger art, although the might of the attack would be stronger, it was unknown how much astral energy he would have to expend. This caused Qin Wentian to sigh in admiration. Cultivation truly required resources. If he didn't have enough Yuan meteor stones, he wouldn't even be able to cultivate this innate technique. Just think about it, he couldn't possibly exhaust the astral energy from the 9 heavenly layers after exhausting the astral energy in his body. If he did that, he would waste too much time. Without resources, it would be extremely difficult to cultivate. Hence, many ordinary people would choose to plunder and risk their lives. Qin Wentian cultivated for a short period of time before entering his dreamscape once again. In his dreamscape, he could imagine to his heart's content as he pleased. On the second day, the people from the Thousand Jew Alliance arrived and delivered the items he wanted. After Qin Wentian paid them for the items, they immediately left, not disturbing Qin Wentian's cultivation. Glancing at the items on the ground, a smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. He could finally attempt to break through to the second level of the Fiend Transformation Art. Once he reached the second level of the Fiend Transformation Art, it would be much easier for him to cultivate the heaven-breaking finger art. For the next few days, a towering demonic qi could be sensed from the back mountain of the White Deer Institute. Many people turned their gazes in that direction as expressions of bewilderment could be seen on their faces. Why would the demonic qi be so intense? Could it be that Qin Wentian's astral soul contained a powerful demonic beast astral soul? Was he cultivating a powerful demonic beast cultivation art or innate technique? Although puzzled, no one disturbed Qin Wentian. Many people who were watching even saw the shadow of the demonic beast rise into the void and then gradually disappear. 3 days later, Qin Wentian's entire body was enveloped by a terrifying demonic qi. His entire person resembled a fearsome demonic beast. Even for the most powerful demonic beasts, they wouldn't be able to match the intensity of his demonic qi. A low roar emanated from the demonic aura. The demonic aura in the void suddenly converged into a vortex and rushed madly into Qin Wentian's body. Very soon, the demonic figure gradually appeared in their line of sight. However, within his body, there seemed to be a terrifying demonic beast's life force. That exuberant, surging vitality made people's hearts tremble. The Fiend Transformation Art allowed the cultivator to transform into a human. The cultivator would be able to combine the strengths of both humans and demons into a single body. The body of a human would possess the exuberant life force of a demon, a powerful physique, a terrifying fleshly body, and a terrifying explosive strength. The unique characteristics of demons would be imparted onto the cultivator. At this moment, if there was someone else present, they would be able to clearly sense that the current Qin Wentian's vitality and the strength of his physique had already far surpassed those at the same level as him. If it was purely based on physique, without the use of astral energy or innate techniques, he would be able to easily crush those at the same level as him. His physique was at the level of a demonic beast. The second level of the Fiend Transformation Art, completed. A smile appeared in Qin Wentian's eyes. Being able to cultivate the second level of the Fiend Transformation Art in such a short period of time definitely had something to do with the terrifying bloodline power in his body. After completing the second level of the Fiend Transformation Art, Qin Wentian didn't leave. Instead, he continued to cultivate the heaven-breaking finger while waiting for news from the Thousand-Jew Alliance regarding Hua Xiaoyun. In the blink of an eye, another 7 days passed. During these 7 days, the Lung clan had already given their reply. They had already reached a compromise, and their heavenly dipper sovereign, Elder Leng Mao, had already been killed. It wasn't worth it for them to offend Qin Wenyan for the sake of a few people. Not only that, they also heard that Qin Wenyan had already become a guest elder of the Thousand-Jew Alliance. The Lung clan didn't wish to offend Qin Wenyan any further, and hence, they had no choice but to end this matter. As for Hua Xiaoyun, he couldn't wait any longer. He made a trip to the Shadow Tower, and upon hearing that an assassin had already accepted the mission to kill Qin Wenyan, and that the assassin had already arrived at the eastern region of the Moon Continent to set up an ambush, Hua Xiaoyun also left the northern region of the Moon Continent. He wanted to see how Qin Wenyan would die. What Hua Xiaoyun didn't know was that the moment he stepped into the eastern region of the Moon Continent, there were also people paying attention to him. Qin Wenyan finally received news of Hua Xiaoyun's whereabouts. Not only that, the Thousand-Jew Alliance had also informed him that Hua Xiaoyun had actually arrived at the eastern region. This news caused Qin Wenyan's eyes to flash with sharpness. This Hua Xiaoyun really came at the right time. How could he kill Hua Xiaoyun without the Hua clan knowing? Qin Wenyan understood that with the status of the Hua clan, their intelligence network would definitely be extremely powerful. If he directly killed Hua Xiaoyun, it would be easily discovered. If he killed a descendant of the Hua clan, it would be extremely difficult for him to remain in the Moon Continent any longer. But no matter what, Hua Xiaoyun had to die. Even if he had no other choice, he would still have to kill Hua Xiaoyun if he had to leave the Moon Continent. Qin Wenyan walked out of the White Deer Institute. He didn't bid farewell to anyone, nor did he tell Bai Lu that he wanted to kill Hua Xiaoyun. He didn't want anyone else to be implicated in this matter. Chapter 295. Qin Wenyan went alone to look for Hua Xiaoyun because the Thousand-Jew Alliance told him that Hua Xiaoyun only had an initial heavenly dipper sovereign as his bodyguard. If that was the case, his puppet would still be able to stall for time. As for Hua Xiaoyun, Qin Wenyan could deal with him himself. Naturally, Qin Wenyan didn't know that the reason why Hua Xiaoyun came to the eastern region of the Moon Continent was because of the assassin who wanted to assassinate him. Hua Xiaoyun also didn't know that the moment he stepped into the eastern region, he had already been targeted. Not only that, the assassin had already informed Qin Wenyan. Both of them wanted the other to die, yet they didn't know the danger they were facing. When Qin Wenyan stepped out of the White Deer Institute, there were already people watching him. On the streets, a horse carriage was slowly moving forward. The driver of the carriage looked extremely ordinary, and his head was lowered as he slowly drove the horse carriage forward. Qin Wenyan didn't even notice the existence of a horse carriage. In the streets of the Moon Continent, it was simply too ordinary. Not only that, the carriage wasn't eye-catching at all. It was moving slowly, far away from him, and wouldn't attract any attention. But at this moment, beside the driver of the horse carriage, a silhouette could be seen. This silhouette had an ancient sword strapped to his back and wore a silver-white mask, revealing only a pair of eyes. The driver of the horse carriage acted as though he didn't see the silhouette and continued to drive the horse forward. However, the silhouette also quietly followed behind, neither hurrying nor slow, maintaining the exact same posture as the driver. "This is my mission." The coachman suddenly raised his head. A sharp gaze flashed across his eyes as he glanced at the silver-masked figure with the ancient sword on his back. His voice was directly transmitted into the other party's ears. Then he lowered his head and continued driving. "I know." The silhouette lightly nodded. "If you know, then do what you need to do." The driver of the horse coldly spoke. As a colleague, he quickly recalled who the silhouette was. Silver Snake was the same as him, an assassin hired by the Shadow Pavilion. He had the same level of authority as the driver of the Hall of Missions, and could accept missions on the 5th level of the Hall of Missions. Silver Snake's cultivation base was only at the peak of Yuanfu. Originally, he didn't have the qualifications to have such a high level of authority. However, he had once completed an extremely shocking mission and successfully assassinated a heaven-shaking character. I won't ask for your reward, Inshi said calmly. But you have to listen to me. Don't be in a hurry to act. If we follow them for too long, they'll notice us sooner or later. When it's about time, we can make our move, the driver said calmly. No, wait. Wait for him to find your helper. That way, you'll have one more helper, the silver snake continued as if it had seen through everything. Helpers. The coachman's voice was a little hoarse. His helpers were all in the carriage. Don't worry, I've already investigated clearly. If I'm not mistaken, your employer has arrived. Right now, he's going to find your employer. When they make their move, you can make your move. That will be the best time. As for the employer's life or death, what does that have to do with you? Inshi's voice caused a chill to run down the coachman's spine. Although the Shadow Tower wouldn't hide the mission details, they would still keep the identity of the employer a secret. How did Inshi know who the employer was? Not only that, Inshi seemed to want to make use of the employer as well, so that he would have a better chance of completing the mission. If that was the case, could it be that Inshi had a personal grudge with this fourth-ranked Grandmaster? Who was this Inshi? However, he wasn't worried that Inshi would lie to him. Silver Snake's cultivation base was at the 9th level of Yuanfu. If he wanted to kill Inshi, it wouldn't be too much of a problem. In an inn located in the eastern region of the Moon Continent, Hua Xiaoyan was currently enjoying his wine. At this moment, a joyous smile could be seen on his face. The revenge for his severed arm should be coming soon. The assassins of the Shadow Tower would definitely not disappoint him. Raising the wine cup in his hand, Hua Xiaoyan drained it in one gulp. A cold light flickered in his eyes as he stared at the person in front of him, only to see that in front of him, there was a young lady clad in a red dress. She was extremely beautiful, exuding an aura of transcendence. With a single glance, one could tell that she was the daughter of a major power, exuding an aura of elegance. This young lady seemed to have sensed his gaze, as she inclined her head and glanced at Hua Xiaoyan. Her gaze caused Hua Xiaoyan's heart to pound as he silently mused, "What a beauty!" The young lady's snow-white skin was as soft as snow, as though it could be broken by the slightest breeze. With a single glance, one could tell that this young lady's figure was exceedingly exquisite. Her red lips further enhanced her beauty. Which clan does this young lady belong to in the Moon Continent? Hua Xiaoyan mused. If there was such a young lady in the Moon Continent, she definitely wouldn't be a nameless nobody. Not only that, based on her demeanor, she seemed to be from a major power. Although Hua Xiaoyan was a silk pants, he still had a discerning eye. When the young lady saw Hua Xiaoyan staring at her, an expression of unhappiness involuntarily flickered in her eyes. Her slight frown caused Hua Xiaoyan's heart to palpitate with excitement. "My name is Hua Xiaoyan, how should I address you?" Hua Xiaoyan clasped his hands in greeting, only to discover that he only had one arm left. His heart couldn't help but ache, and he could only smile and nod his head to the young lady. The young lady unhappily stared at him as she coldly stated, "The second generation of the Hua clan has already lost an arm, yet you're still so dishonest?" Hua Xiaoyan's countenance stiffened as his countenance turned incredibly ugly. "I'm just asking nicely, yet Miss dares to insult me?" Hua Xiaoyan coldly stated, "I wonder which clan's young lady dares to be so arrogant." "Shu Ruanyu," the young lady replied, causing Hua Xiaoyan's countenance to stiffen as a name appeared in his mind. He involuntarily laughed. "Oh, so it's Miss Shu. I heard that Miss Shu is about to be engaged to Brother Young. Congratulations." Shu Ruanyu was the golden daughter of one of the major clans in the eastern region of the Moon Continent, the Shu clan. Regardless of beauty or talent, she was extremely outstanding. A few days ago, the Star-Seizing Manor wanted to find a partner for Yang Fan, and Yang Fan had fallen in love with Shu Ruanyu. The Star-Seizing Manor personally proposed to the Shu clan, and they were naturally overjoyed. The heavens chosen of the Star-Seizing Manor, Yang Fan, to the Shu clan, was undoubtedly someone of a higher status than them. Naturally, Shu Ruanyu herself was also extraordinary. She had already stepped into the 8th level of Yuanfu at the tender age of 21, which was also an extremely outstanding achievement. Xu Ruanyu continued to ignore Hua Xiaoyun. Hua Xiaoyun had an awkward expression on his face, but he was extremely unhappy in his heart. Now that his status in the Hua clan had dropped, even Yang Fan's fiancée was in front of him, he had to admit that he was inferior. Especially when he saw how Xu Ruanyu looked down on him, he wanted nothing more than to trample on her mercilessly. Sadly, he wouldn't have such an opportunity, and could only fantasize about it in his heart. At this moment, outside of the inn, a silhouette clad in long robes was leisurely strolling about, attracting the attention of many in the crowd. Because this silhouette didn't seem to exude any aura of life. His countenance seemed to have a metallic sheen to it, and his eyes were as sharp as swords, yet they didn't seem to belong to a human. It was as though he was a puppet. There seems to be one there as well. A person walked to the side of a puppet, and involuntarily turned his head to look in that direction. There was another puppet there, but strangely, it seemed as though someone had intentionally released this puppet. And in a wine shop opposite of Hua Xiaoyun's inn, a silhouette could be seen with his head lowered. He wore a conical bamboo hat, and no one noticed that in the center of his brows there was a glimmer of light, as though there was a third eye there. This person was none other than Qin Wenyan. After he obtained the location of Hua Xiaoyun's inn, he immediately came here. That third eye of his was currently glowing with a terrifying light, and abruptly, his perception expanded frenziedly. Not a single person's movements could be hidden from his eyes. On the streets, silhouettes of people could be seen moving about, and from afar, a horse carriage could be seen leisurely making its way over. Beside the coachman, there was a masked man with an ancient sword strapped to his back. It's them? Qin Wenyan faintly felt that something was amiss. It was as though he had seen this horse carriage before, but he didn't pay any attention to it. And what made Qin Wenyan even more puzzled was that he couldn't see through the coachman's cultivation base. If he couldn't see through it, it meant that the coachman was a heavenly dipper sovereign. As for the masked man beside the coachman, his cultivation base was at the 9th level of Yuanfu. Within the carriage, there were 3 other people, and their eyes flickered with a terrifying light. Something was wrong. Qin Wenyan instantly felt that something was amiss. It seemed as though this horse carriage was following him here. Bzz. Abruptly, a silhouette appeared beside Qin Wenyan. It was none other than Qin, and the instant she appeared, many in the inn cast their gazes over as expressions of shock and amazement flickered on their faces. The young woman quietly sat beside Qin Wenyan, and it was as though she could sense that there were people following Qin Wenyan. She wasn't good with words, so she didn't say anything. She knew that at this moment, she couldn't be too far away from Qin Wenyan. Qin Wenyan's perception once again reached the inn Hua Xiaoyun was in. He saw Hua Xiaoyun, as well as his heavenly dipper sovereign protector. He even saw Hua Xiaoyun speaking to an extremely beautiful young woman, but that young woman couldn't be bothered to respond to him. Emichim? The protector behind Hua Xiaoyun furrowed his brows. He suddenly had a strange feeling as though someone was spying on him. Yet, he had no idea where this feeling came from. Could it be that someone extremely powerful was paying attention to him in the shadows? Hua Xiaoyun was oblivious to this. He was currently staring at Xu Ruanyu, his eyes narrowed, and a lustful light flickered within them. It was as though he was thinking of something filthy. Boom! Abruptly, a white bolt of lightning blasted into his mind. Hua Xiaoyun's mind trembled violently as he groaned in agony, his countenance instantly turning pale. Young master! The protector seemed to have sensed something. Hua Xiaoyun roared in a low voice as he felt a terrifying bolt of lightning blasting into his mind. It was as though there was a terrifying primordial beast roaring at him, pressing down on his mind. Boom, boom, boom. Hua Xiaoyun's body was instantly drenched in sweat, and his countenance was as pale as a sheet of paper as he desperately tried to defend his consciousness. Junior was too rash. I don't know which senior I've offended. Hua Xiaoyun roared in a low voice as he felt a sense of impending death enveloping him. This kind of consciousness attack was definitely from a heavenly dipper sovereign. Chapter 296. The people in the inn all had expressions of shock on their faces when they heard Hua Xiaoyun's roar. Even the eyes of the guard flickered with a cold light. It seemed like his premonition was right. There was indeed someone spying on them, and that person actually launched an attack on Hua Xiaoyun's consciousness. However, there wasn't any abnormality in the inn. In other words, the attacker wasn't even in the inn, yet he was able to attack the consciousness of others through the air. Such a method caused him to feel extreme trepidation. Shu Ruanyu's beautiful eyes flickered with astonishment as she stared at the attacker in the inn. This attack definitely didn't originate from the inn. Arg! Hua Xiaoyun screamed in agony as he clutched his head with both hands. An expression of extreme agony could be seen on his face as the lightning-fast attack grew more and more intense. In his sea of consciousness, the silhouette of a gigantic primordial beast appeared, wreaking havoc in his sea of consciousness, containing a terrifying mandate of astral energy, wanting to destroy his will. Hua Xiaoyun's current strength had already improved compared to the time he was in Chu. However, because of the injuries he suffered back then, he wasn't able to reflect on his mistakes and change for the better. Instead, he could only spend his days in depression, thinking about revenge. His improvement was limited, and he had only advanced from the 4th level of Yuan Fu to the 5th level. As for the mandate of astral energy he had comprehended, it was still at the initial boundary. And precisely because of his weak will, it was extremely difficult for him to endure such an attack. His opponent's consciousness attack seemed to contain a tyrannical mandate, causing him to feel as though his brain was about to explode. Let's go. His guard pulled Hua Xiaoyun's body as he soared up into the air. With a deafening boom, the roof of the inn shattered. Hua Xiaoyun's guard prepared to bring Hua Xiaoyun away from this place. If this continued, Hua Xiaoyun's consciousness would be directly erased, turning him into an idiot. There was no difference between that and death. Shu Ruanyu stared at the air, only to see her silhouette flickering as she soared up into the air as well. Who exactly was so powerful to be able to launch a consciousness attack from such a distance? At the instant Hua Xiaoyun's guard rushed out of the inn, an ice-cold saber light descended from the skies. The sharpness of the saber light caused the hearts of those who saw it to tremble. This figure was clad in black robes. However, the metallic eyes of the figure didn't seem to belong to a human, as they were filled with a bone-chilling coldness. Who is it? Hua Xiaoyun's bodyguard howled in rage as he slammed his palms out 9 times consecutively, causing a raging wind to kick up. The edge of his saber slashed downwards, following the flow of the raging wind, slicing through the body of his opponent. Buzz! The coldness in the air was as intense as ever. Both of the legs of Hua Xiaoyun's protector swept out with a similarly cold glint. Hua Xiaoyun's protector turned his gaze over, only to see that the legs of Hua Xiaoyun's protector were also covered with a terrifying blade edge. His countenance stiffened as he frenziedly evaded the attacks. At the same time, with a howl of rage, his astral nova manifested, transforming into a cold saber that slashed out. A thunderous rumbling sound echoed out as Hua Xiaoyun's protector retreated with great speed. Yet, his hand was still tightly gripping onto Hua Xiaoyun, refusing to let go. At this moment, Hua Xiaoyun clutched his head as an expression of extreme agony appeared on his face. The will of Hua Xiaoyun's protector's consciousness attack seemed as though it would never stop. This caused the protector's countenance to turn ashen. There was still one more person hiding in the shadows. But given the strength of his opponent, why didn't he attack directly? At this moment, Qin Wenyan was also extremely depressed. His head was still lowered as he frenziedly attacked Hua Xiaoyun. His third eye flickered with a terrifying cold light, yet at the same time as he attacked, he could also sense that the coachman as well as the passengers on the carriage were closing in on him. Qin Wenyan was truly here because of him. With 2 4th-ranked puppets, in addition to his long-ranged attacks, killing Hua Xiaoyun should have been a surefire success. In fact, if his movements were fast enough, he could retreat immediately after killing Hua Xiaoyun. But who would have thought that he would actually be the target of someone else's attention? Die! Qin Wentian's will frenziedly gushed out from his third eye, gushing into Hua Xiaoyun's sea of consciousness. Hua Xiaoyun screamed in agony, howling in agony. It wouldn't be long before he couldn't hold on any longer. Even if he didn't directly attack Qin Wendian, he would still die to this long-range attack. The coachman was already not far away from him. If it wasn't for Qin Wentian's terrifying perception, he wouldn't even know how he died. Qin Wentian's body was still hunched over, and his disguise was perfect. Swishing sounds rang out. Qin Wentian's body tensed up as his countenance paled. He knew that he no longer had a chance. His opponent only needed to give him a few more breaths of time before Hua Xiaoyun would be unable to hold on any longer. What a pity! At the same time he acted against Hua Xiaoyun, these people also acted against him. Not only that, the moment they acted, they directly restricted his movements. It was as though someone had bound his body. This was an extremely powerful will of mandates, binding him. Qin Wenyin inclined his head, his third eye was already closed. A cold light flickered in his eyes, only to see the coachman's silhouette flickering as he dashed towards Qin Wenyin with extreme speed. An intense killing intent locked onto Qin Wenyin. Killing intent, an extremely intense killing intent. Qing Er's silhouette flickered as she instantly appeared in front of Qin Wenyin. Qing Er's body emanated a mysterious intent, and in an instant, the binding force on Qin Wenyin disappeared. Qing Er waved her palms as a lotus bloomed, shooting towards the coachman. At the same time, her silhouette flickered, bringing Qin Wenyin along with her as she soared into the skies. Mandate of space. She actually comprehended such a high level of mandate at such a young age. The coachman stared at the skies as an expression of shock appeared on his face. The will of space was an extremely tyrannical willpower. Perhaps the first and second realms were not strong enough, but the further one progressed, the more powerful the will of space would be. He had once witnessed with his own eyes how terrifying the strength of an expert who had comprehended the will of space was. This beautiful young lady actually comprehended the mandate of space, forming her own dimension and blocking his mandate of space. However, he was still an assassin after all. When Qing Er and Qin Wendian soared into the skies, he followed suit. At the same time, 3 other silhouettes soared into the skies as well, all of them rushing towards Qing Er and Qin Wendian. The commotion here instantly attracted the attention of those in the inn. Hua Xiaoyun heaved a long sigh of relief. His countenance was deathly pale, and his entire body was drenched in sweat. At this moment, he suddenly sensed a battle taking place beside him. With just a single glance, his eyes froze. It's Qin Wendian. Hua Xiaoyun's heart pounded violently. He naturally saw Qing Er as well. She must have been the one who launched the attack against him earlier. Hua Xiaoyun's countenance contorted. He didn't expect that Qin Wendian would actually be here to kill him. Kill him now. Hua Xiaoyun howled in a frenzy. At this moment, he naturally understood that the person who attacked Qin Wendian was an assassin from the Shadow Pagoda, hired by him. A bunch of trash, they actually allowed Qin Wendian to kill his way here. Hua Xiaoyun howled in his heart. The assassin he hired actually allowed the target he wanted to kill his way here. How despicable! Qin Wentian's gaze abruptly turned incomparably cold. A long vine abruptly whizzed towards him, coiling around his body. Qing Er blocked in front of him, slashing out with a beam of golden light. In an instant, the vine was severed, but in the next instant, more and more vines grew out. Not only that, the number of vines increased as they frenziedly sped towards Qing Er and Qin Wendian. Qing Er furrowed her brows. The opponent's attacks were extremely troublesome. She wouldn't have any problems dealing with them, but Qin Wendian would definitely be in trouble. Qi! Abruptly, a demonic snake appeared behind Qin Wendian. It was the Heavenly Dipper sovereign madam who had made her move. A raging wind gusted by as a golden-armored puppet appeared in Hua Xiaoyun's vision. This golden-armored puppet was originally prepared to deal a fatal blow to Hua Xiaoyun, but now, it had no choice but to summon it back. The madam and the golden-armored puppet clashed against each other. However, a gigantic python howled in rage as it lunged towards Qin Wendian. There were 4 Heavenly Dipper sovereigns in the Heavenly Crippling sect. According to their estimations, 2 Heavenly Dipper sovereigns would be able to easily delay Qing Er and the 2 golden-armored puppets. The disciples of the heavenly crippling sect only needed to prepare for the worst. However, Qing Er's strength had far exceeded their expectations. She had already grasped the mandate of space, and was able to prevent the mandate of space from affecting her and Qin Wenyin. If not, the mandate of space would have been able to restrain Qing and Qin Wenyin. As long as Qing was delayed for a short moment, killing Qin Wenyin would be an easy task. Come here. The gigantic python opened its jaws, causing the skies to change color. Qin Wenyin felt his body being dragged uncontrollably towards the python's mouth. Although there were some surprises, with Hua Xiaoyun's bodyguards helping them to delay one of the golden armored puppets, it wouldn't be too difficult for them to kill Qin Wenyin. Qing Er's beautiful countenance changed when she saw this scene. After which, a golden lotus blossomed beneath her feet, expanding outwards in an instant, enveloping the entire space within a layer of mystical energy. Let me deal with them. Qing softly spoke. The golden lotus enveloped the entire space as she held onto Qin Wentian's arm and flew into the air. The golden armored puppet will assist you. Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice. Cast a glance at Qin Wenyin as she replied in a low voice, I'll be fine. Her voice was as cold as ever, and as the sound of her voice faded, she sent Qin Wenyin out of the golden lotus. After Qin Wenyin exited, the blooming golden lotus closed up, exuding an indescribable beauty. The golden lotus was translucent, and one could clearly see everything within it. The gigantic and beautiful lotus enveloped the two heavenly Dipper sovereigns within. The mandate of space, Qing Er's talent is so high. Qin Wenyin murmured. However, he couldn't care less about that because the other two in the carriage had already arrived. An overwhelming killing intent bore down on him, akin to the aura of the Grim Reaper. Rays of light flashed as a fearsome long spear appeared in Qin Wentian's hands, while a blood-colored stone tablet floated in the air. The two newcomers weren't weak. One was at the 8th level of Yuanfu, while the other was at the 6th level. Both of them gave Qin Wenyin an intense sense of threat. Qin Wenyin, you're dead for sure. A malevolent expression appeared on Hua Xiaoyun's face. Qin Wenyin wouldn't be able to escape even if he had wings. Hua Xiaoyun's protector was still engaged in battle with the bladed puppet. He could break away from the puppet and kill Qin Wenyin, but he didn't dare to do so. If he killed Qin Wenyin, the puppet would kill Hua Xiaoyun. To him, Hua Xiaoyun's life was what he needed to protect. Is he Qin Wenyin? Shu Ruanyu coldly asked Hua Xiaoyun. Her fiery red skirt fluttered in the wind as she stared in the direction of Qin Wenyin, her beautiful eyes flashing with a cold intent. Zhu Sha was her uncle. According to Yang Fan, Zhu Sha had died in the hands of the youngest 4th-ranked grandmaster in the Moon Continent during the refinement grounds of divine inscriptions. Yes, he's Qin Wenyin. Does Miss Shu have a grudge against him? Hua Xiaoyun coldly laughed, only to see Shu Ruanyu coldly glancing at him. The young master of the Hua clan is truly trash. He's useless, yet he actually hired an assassin. The smile on Hua Xiaoyun's face froze, as his countenance turned incredibly ugly. Chapter 297. There were 2 heavenly Dipper sovereigns and 2 Yuanfu cultivators from the heavenly cripple sect. At this moment, these 2 Yuanfu disciples stood on the left and right of Qin Wenyin. 4th-ranked divine weapon. That 8th-level Yuanfu disciple stared at the long spear in Qin Wentian's hands. Qin Wenyin was too generous. The 4 of them had been assassins for many years, and the vast majority of the resources they earned were all spent on their cultivation. To them, a 4th-ranked divine weapon was a luxury, let alone a 4th-ranked puppet. However, after completing this mission, they would have won. Gravity. The mandate of the 8th-level Yuanfu cultivator gushed forth. The mandate he had comprehended was the mandate of Great Earth, and the first level of the mandate of Great Earth was the mandate of gravity. Not only that, his mandate of Great Earth had already reached the transformation boundary. In an instant, Qin Wenyin felt his entire body becoming extremely heavy, and he wasn't used to it. A terrifying demonic qi permeated the air as the power of his bloodline thrummed within his body. He wanted to use the power of his bloodline to compensate for the heaviness he felt. Boom! That 8th level Yuanfu cultivator moved as a long spear appeared in his hands. The spear was fast and heavy, causing the hearts of those who saw it to pound. If this spear landed on their bodies, even if they didn't die, they would be heavily injured. The long spear in his hand stabbed out explosively. Although he wasn't used to the heaviness of the spear, Qin Wentian's arm was still extremely stable. Black light flashed as a black dragon lunged out. The long spear collided with the spear, causing a thunderous boom to echo out. Qin Wenyan only felt his internal organs trembling as the heaviness of the spear was transmitted into his body, causing him to groan in agony. The strength of an 8th level Yuanfu cultivator and a 4th level Yuanfu cultivator were on a completely different level. If it weren't for his tyrannical physique, he would have been heavily injured in a single strike. 4th-ranked divine weapons are so troublesome to forge. Qin Wenyan silently cursed in his heart as he frenziedly channeled his astral energy into the long spear, forming a connection with the divine inscriptions within. The 4th-ranked divine inscriptions within the spear weren't inscribed by him, and hence, in order to activate them, he would need an immense amount of astral energy to unleash a 4th-ranked attack. And this was under the condition that his senses were so strong that he could clearly sense the intricacies of the divine inscriptions. But in a battle, his opponents wouldn't give him too much time. After the 8th level Yuanfu cultivator unleashed his first strike, the second spear strike already arrived. This spear strike was even more ferocious than the first. Earth Wave. His spear was akin to a dragon, exploding forth as a terrifying wave of pressure gushed forth. His opponent's astral soul was released. It was actually a heavenly earth-type astral soul, causing his entire body to be enveloped in a layer of heaviness. Qin Wenyan sliced open the skin on his finger, abruptly stabbing it into the air. Instantly, the Yellow Springs monument manifested, slamming towards his opponent, blocking the great earth ripple. With the Yellow Springs monument manifested, the other 6th level Yuanfu cultivator no longer had anything to fear. He instantly acted. Like a phantom, a terrifying ghost-like claw slashed out towards Qin Wenyan's throat, giving off an eerie feeling. The Earth Wave and the Yellow Springs monument collided, yet Qin Wenyan abruptly turned his gaze over. His ice-cold eyes swept over, colliding with his opponent's eyes. In an instant, the two of them stared at each other, as though the power of their wills intersected in the air, causing Qin Wenyan's heart to tremble. His opponent could also use his eyes to attack? The ghost-like claw closed in, its 5 fingers gleaming with a black light as it grabbed towards Qin Wenyan's neck. However, at this moment, a terrifying demonic qi gushed forth from Qin Wenyan. The demonic bloodline of the supreme primordial demonic beasts in his body erupted forth, permeating the entire space. Sleep. Qin Wenyan's mandate was unleashed, causing the eyes of his opponent to narrow as he felt a sense of drowsiness. The ghost-like claw swept past Qin Wenyan's throat, only to discover that Qin Wenyan's arm was actually covered in a layer of demonic scales, incomparably tough. Voila! The ghost-like claw slashed out, shattering the scales, causing fresh blood to flow. However, Qin Wenyan's black spear pierced out in a straight line, forcing his opponent to retreat with explosive speed. But how could he make it in time? Executing the Garuda movement technique, Qin Wenyan manifested a pair of Garuda wings on his back. Qin Wenyan's silhouette flickered as the long spear pierced through his opponent's throat. This defense. Shu Ruanyu, who was watching from afar, felt her heart trembling in fear. Qin Wenyan's arm was actually covered in demonic scales. His defensive prowess was terrifying to the extreme. It was as though the Yellow Springs monument had eyes of its own, frenziedly clashing against the opponent at the 8th level of Yuanfu, giving Qin Wenyan enough time to kill his opponent. Junior brother. With a howl of rage, Qin Wenyan only felt his back trembling violently as his countenance paled. He spun around and spat out a mouthful of fresh blood onto the Yellow Springs monument. Instantly, the blood qi emanating from the Yellow Springs monument grew even stronger, unceasingly rumbling sounds echoed out, causing his opponent to be in the same state of discomfort as him. Qin Wenyan was restricted by gravity, while his opponent's heart and blood were still beating. The aura exuded by the black spear grew more and more terrifying. Earlier, when Qin Wenyan's spear pierced through his opponent's throat, he didn't activate the divine inscriptions within. If he wanted to activate the fourth-ranked divine inscriptions, he would need to absorb a terrifying amount of astral energy. If it was a heavenly Dipper sovereign, they would be able to do so in an instant, but his cultivation base was too low. I want you to die. The glow of his opponent's astral souls grew brighter and brighter as a layer of Earth-type armor materialized around his body. The killing intent in the eyes of the 8th-level Yuanfu cultivator was terrifying to behold. His body moved once more, and Qin Wenyan pointed out with his finger, causing the Yellow Springs monument to advance madly, while he himself retreated backwards. At this moment, his opponent allowed the Yellow Springs monument to tremble as much as he wanted. The Earth-type armor seemed to be able to reduce the impact of the tremors. Puchi! The long spear was as fast as lightning, carrying with it a terrifying might. Qin Wenyan's speed was greatly affected by the 8-fold gravitational force, and there was no way for him to evade. Qin Wenyan's eyes flickered with a cold light. He folded his wings as demonic qi towered up the skies, enveloping his entire body within. Pim! The terrifying shockwaves instantly destroyed the demonic qi. The long spear pierced straight into the wings, and a malevolent expression could be seen on Qin Wenyan's face. The long spear pierced forwards, causing piercing sounds to ring out unceasingly, wanting to take Qin Wenyan's life. Break for me! With a howl of rage, his wings ruptured as the demonic qi dissipated. Qin Wenyan's silhouette appeared once more as the long spear pierced through his left chest, almost piercing through his heart. However, Qin Wenyan's eyes flickered with a terrifying killing intent. At the instant his wings ruptured, the long spear had already left Qin Wenyan's hands as a terrifying black light engulfed the heavens and earth. The terrifying might contained within the spear was simply too terrifying, as it shot straight towards his opponent's throat. That person retreated by reflex. With a thunderous boom, the Yellow Springs monument directly imprinted itself on his back, causing his countenance to turn deathly pale. A beam of black light flashed, and with a light sound, the long spear pierced into the center of his brows. A terrifying sinister aura erupted forth as his body directly exploded. He died. Qin Wenyan pulled the long spear out from his chest, his robes stained red with fresh blood. Coughing a few times, Qin Wenyan's eyes were as cold as ice. That fellow doesn't care about his life. Xu Ruanyu was somewhat taken aback by Qin Wenyan's ruthlessness during battle. A 4th-level Yuanfu cultivator actually managed to kill an 8th and 6th-level Yuanfu cultivator. Although he had borrowed the power of a 4th-ranked divine weapon, as well as the power of the Yellow Springs monument, Qin Wenyan's ruthlessness had also been displayed. If that long spear had been just a little bit more accurate, that person would have already died. Naturally, she could also tell that even without the aid of the divine weapon and the Yellow Springs monument, Qin Wenyan's combat prowess was already extremely terrifying. His combat prowess far exceeded his cultivation base. She was thinking that even without the aid of the divine weapon, Qin Wenyan would still be able to kill someone at the 6th level of Yuanfu. However, the astral energy in his body had been completely depleted when he used that spear of darkness. After all, his cultivation base was only at the 4th level of Yuanfu. Go and kill him. Over at Hua Xiaoyun's side, his protectors stood by his side. There were a few puppets guarding him. One of them was a 4th-ranked puppet while the rest were all 3rd-ranked puppets. Young master, your safety is of utmost importance, the protector indifferently stated. If you can't even deal with a few puppets, what's the point of keeping you around? Hua Xiaoyun unhappily replied. Young master, I can easily deal with the 3rd-ranked puppets, but they are only watching you from afar. That 4th-ranked puppet is much more valuable compared to a 4th-ranked divine weapon, and it's extremely difficult to forge. The divine imprints inscribed within are all 4th-ranked attack-type divine imprints, equivalent to the innate techniques of heavenly Dipper sovereigns. Other than the fact that it's not as agile as a human, it doesn't have much of a disadvantage. If it wasn't for the sake of protecting young master, I would naturally have a way to deal with it, but the protector didn't continue his sentence, causing Hua Xiaoyun's countenance to turn even more unsightly. In the end, was he hinting that he was useless? Let me help you deal with these third-ranked puppets. A voice drifted over as a masked silhouette dashed towards the third-ranked puppets. He unsheathed his sword, and as the sword descended, a cold light flashed, incomparably sharp to the extreme. One of the third-ranked puppets lifted its arms to defend, only to see the sword gleaming with an eerie light. Fast, fast to the extreme. A crisp sound rang out as the puppet was directly sliced into two. What a terrifying sword! The protector's countenance stiffened. He didn't know where this masked silhouette came from. Qin Wenqian's countenance stiffened. This third-ranked puppet was ultimately not as powerful as the golden armored puppets he had obtained from the refinement grounds. Regardless of attack or defense, they were all inferior. This assassin seemed to have been with the coachman earlier. Who would have thought that he would be so powerful? You're dead for sure. Shu Ruanyu walked forwards, arriving beside Qin Wenyan. Evidently he's here for you. Initially, he wanted to leave you to the four assassins, but who would have thought that your combat prowess would be so impressive? After he deals with the puppets, he would definitely come after you. Those puppets should be your final trump card, right? I don't think we're acquainted with each other, right? Qin Wenyan stared at the red-robed maiden in front of him. This maiden's silhouette was extremely beautiful, yet he didn't seem to recognize her at all. It's enough that I know you. Since you are going to die sooner or later, why don't you die in my hands? Shu Ruanyu's astral soul flickered, as the shadow of flames flickered. Stellar martial cultivators were used to releasing their third astral soul during combat, because their third astral soul was the most powerful. Shu Ruanyu's third astral soul originated from the fourth heavenly layer and was filled with a violent fiery aura. Are you so confident that you can defeat me? Qin Wenqian's eyes flickered with a cold light as his demonic qi intensified. I'm afraid you don't have much astral energy left in you, right? It's not even enough for you to activate the strongest attack of your fourth-ranked divine weapon. Shu Ruanyu faintly spoke, her countenance filled with arrogance. Since they met, she might as well avenge her uncle. Chapter 298. Not only that, with your injuries, even if your recovery speed is astonishing, are you not affected at all? Shu Ruanyu turned her gaze onto Qin Wenqian's chest. If that spear had been a little more accurate, or if Qin Wenqian's speed had been a little slower, he would have already died. However, Qin Wenqian's recovery speed was truly impressive. The aura of his bloodline circulated within his body, preventing his blood from flowing out. Qin Wenyan glanced at the fourth-ranked divine weapon in his hands. With his current strength, using a fourth-ranked divine weapon was indeed a little too forceful. With a slight intention of his will, Qin Wenyan kept the long spear, causing Shu Ruanyu to be stunned. Shu Ruanyu stared at Qin Wenyan as a cold, arrogant smile flickered in her eyes. I'll let you die knowing that the Zhu Sha you killed was my uncle. A low roar drifted over from afar. Shu Ruanyu furrowed her brows as she turned her gaze over. After which, she saw a demonic beast howling in her direction. On the back of the demonic beast, there were a few silhouettes, one of whom she recognized. It was none other than Bai Lu Jing, a ranker on the heavenly fate rankings. Imichem? Not far away, the masked swordsman had already destroyed the third-ranked puppets. Initially, he thought that it would be enough to just sit back and watch Qin Wenyan die. Who would have thought that he would have to act personally? Evidently, Shu Ruanyu had no way to deal with this Bai Lu Jing. Sword intent permeated the air. Instantly, the masked swordsman dashed over, slashing down with his sword. The will of the sword was released, and Qin Wenyan and the others only felt their bodies being enveloped by the terrifying sword intent, on the verge of destruction. Bai Lu Jing soared up into the air, activating his Hurricane Astral Soul and Seven Slaughters Astral Soul at the same time. His body was like the wind, soaring up into the clouds. His killing intent filled the air as he executed the 9 beheadings of the Great Sun, clashing head-on with the incoming sword. Sir, who are you? Bai Lu Jing stared at the masked swordsman. However, the masked swordsman didn't say a word, slashing out with his sword once more. He didn't want others to know what his astral souls were. Shu Ruanyu, quickly make your move, the masked man commanded Shu Ruanyu as he restrained Bai Lu Jing. Shu Ruanyu nodded lightly. Her mandate of fire abruptly erupted forth, causing Qin Wenyin to feel as though his entire body was about to be ignited. The first level of the mandate of fire, ignition. Not only that, Shu Ruanyu's mandate of fire had already reached the transformation boundary and was extremely ferocious. This woman's figure is really not bad. She's got a lot of potential. Fan Lu murmured, causing Shu Ruanyu's beautiful eyes to freeze. After which, a baleful aura flickered in her eyes as she stared at Fan Lu. However, Fan Lu didn't seem to care at all. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Shu Ruanyu's chest, causing the flames on her body to burn even more violently. You're courting death. Shu Ruanyu roared. After which, she took a step forward and blasted out with her jade-like palms, manifesting a flaming palm imprint that blasted towards Qin Wenyin and the other two. This palm imprint actually disintegrated in the air, enveloping Qin Wenyin, Fan Lu and Chu Meng. Qin Wentian's Heavenly Hammer Astral Soul and Great Dream Astral Soul were released, but the luster of their astral souls was masked by Qin Wenyin. Even so, the power of his astral souls was still extremely shocking. Releasing his will of mandates, Qin Wentian's blood began to boil. The demonic qi exuding from him towered up into the heavens. Taking a step forward, he frenziedly blasted out with his palms as the shadow of a great rock coalesced in the air, transforming into a terrifying great rock that howled in rage as it rushed out, colliding head-on with the flaming palm imprint. The Yellow Springs monument shuddered violently as it bore down on Shu Ruanyu, causing her blood vessels to throb. Brother Mang ignite. Fan Li's Empyrean Flames bloodline erupted forth as golden flames ignited. His palms slammed into Chu Meng's body, instantly causing Chu Meng's body to be engulfed in flames as well. Releasing his astral souls, Chu Meng howled in rage as he drew his bow and shot out 3 arrows. Instant strike. Shu Ruanyu furrowed her brows. Her astral soul from the exalted flame body cascaded downwards as a layer of flame armor covered her body. Boom! A powerful force slammed into the flame armor, causing Shu Ruanyu to be forced to retreat. Qin Wenyin floated in the air, as though he was preparing something. Within Qin Wentian's body, third-ranked divine energy was frenziedly condensing. Currently, his first Yuanfu had already withered away, while a terrifying tempest was brewing in his second Yuanfu. He had no way to condense fourth-ranked divine inscriptions in a short period of time. However, if he were to erupt forth a boundless amount of third-ranked divine energy in an instant, the power unleashed in that instant would definitely be enough to make Shu Ruanyu suffer. Although this was a method of killing 1,000 enemies while sacrificing 800 of his own, the consumption of astral energy in his Yuanfu was simply too terrifying. However, right now, he could only go all out. Divine energy was his advantage, and so was his third Yuanfu. Pu, piu, piu. Numerous arrows rained down on Shu Ruanyu's body, as though there was no end to them. At such a close distance, it was extremely difficult for her to block an instant-kill arrow, especially one that could change direction. Fan Le didn't attack. He actually used his powerful will to control the direction of Chu Meng's arrows, causing them to change direction at the last moment. In just a short instant, Shu Ruanyu's countenance flushed red from anger. Her face was so red that it felt as though blood would drip out at any moment. The arrows that Fan Lu was controlling were actually unceasingly shooting towards her breasts. Although she had the protection of the flame armor, such an attack was enough to drive her crazy. Qin Wenyin couldn't help but perspire in his heart as he stared at Chu Meng's arrows. This damnable fatty was truly a genius. He actually wanted to anger this beautiful maiden to death. However, Shu Ruanyu's flame armor was definitely an innate technique. If not, with Chu Meng's cultivation base at the 6th level of Yuanfu, how could he not be able to penetrate through ordinary astral energy armor? The astral energy circulating around the flame armor grew increasingly intense, as the glow of her astral souls unceasingly cascaded downwards. Shu Ruanyu's demeanor seemed to be undergoing a transformation. Her long hair fluttered in the wind as she took a step forward. The mandate of flames she exuded was so strong that it seemed as though it wanted to incinerate Qin Wenyin. Qin Wenyin was still channeling his power. His palms slammed onto the injured area on his chest as a blood-colored beam of light once again shot towards the Yellow Springs Monument in the air. The might of the Yellow Springs Monument grew even stronger, and as it pressed downwards, it frenziedly suppressed Shu Ruanyu's eruption. Ruanyu! At this moment, a beam of light shot out from behind Shu Ruanyu. That silhouette instantly appeared, and with a single grab, a terrifying star-seizing palm imprint shot towards Qin Wenyin. Young Fan! Qin Wenyan's countenance sank as he explosively retreated. However, that terrifying palm imprint still slammed into his body. With a thunderous boom, Qin Wenyin coughed out a mouthful of blood as he was flung through the air. Courting death. Yang Fan's eyes flickered like lightning. His star-seizing palms once again blasted towards Fan Lu and Chu Mang. The arrows whistled through the air, but they were directly shattered by the star-seizing palms. A thunderous boom rang out as both Fan Lu and Chu Mang were flung through the air. Among the rankers on the Heavenly Fate rankings, Chu Mang, Fan Lu and the rest were simply too far apart. Come back. Qin Wenyan's aura fluctuated as he commanded. Momentarily, the fourth-ranked bladed puppet sped towards Yang Fan. Yang Fan's countenance sank, only to see the bladed puppet madly rushing towards him, slashing out with its saber. That saber light was so sharp that it seemed as though it could sever the entire space. At this moment, an intense killing intent flickered in Qin Wenyan's eyes. Who cared who Qin Wenyan was? Since things had already reached this point, there was no need for him to hold back any longer. Let's go over and kill him. Hua Xiaoyun spoke to the guard beside him after seeing the puppet leaving. That guard nodded his head, and with Hua Xiaoyun in tow, he sped towards Qin Wenyan. But before he could act, Qin Wenyan had already acted. Qin Wenyan soared through the air, walking towards Shu Ruanyu as a terrifying cold light flickered in his eyes. Upon seeing Qin Wenyan taking the initiative to walk towards her, Shu Ruanyu's beautiful eyes similarly flashed with an intense rage. The flames in her palms grew increasingly intense, resembling scorching lava, filled with a terrifying heat. Busy. A raging wind gusted by as Qin Wenyan dashed towards Shu Ruanyu. You're courting death. Shu Ruanyu's fiery palms blasted out, aiming for Qin Wenyan. The flames scorched the heavens, and the entire space around them seemed to have been set ablaze. At the same time, Qin Wenyan blasted out with both of his palms. In that instant, the Yuan Fu and arterial pathways in his body started to churn violently. The divine energy within one of his Yuan Fu erupted forth, transforming into countless swords of slaughter, as well as the terrifying shadow of a great rock, blotting out the skies. Shu Ruanyu's countenance stiffened as she blasted out with both her palms. Numerous flaming silhouettes frenziedly defended against the eruption of divine Yuan energy. The Yellow Springs Monument in the air pressed downwards, causing Shu Ruanyu to groan in misery. Finally, she couldn't endure it any longer and coughed out a mouthful of blood. A crisp cracking sound rang out as her armor shattered into pieces. In the midst of the destructive aura, she suddenly saw a demonic eye. As this eye swept past her, her mind trembled. Scram! It was as though Shu Ruanyu could sense that Qin Wenyin would unleash a ferocious attack at this moment. She slammed out with her palms once more. Evidently, she hadn't expected Qin Wenyin to erupt forth with such a terrifying strength at this instant. If not, she wouldn't have chosen to fight in such close combat. Pooh! A mouthful of scorching hot blood splattered onto Shu Ruanyu's face. This was none other than Qin Wenyan's blood. This caused Shu Ruanyu to close her eyes, and in the next instant, a pair of palms filled with power directly slammed into her chest as the destructive energy madly gushed into her body. Bzzz. Violent flames erupted forth, burning Qin Wenyan's body. Do you want to perish together with me? A cold voice rang out in Shu Ruanyu's mind, causing her heart to tremble. Qin Wenin didn't hold back as he mercilessly delivered a few more palm strikes to her, causing blood to flow unceasingly from the corners of her mouth. "Release her!" A voice filled with rage rang out. When Hua Xiaoyun's protector rushed over, the blade-wielding puppet had already given up on killing Yang Fan, choosing instead to obstruct Hua Xiaoyun's protector. In that short instant, Qin Wenin had already captured Shu Ruanyu. However, from the perspective of the spectators, it seemed as though Qin Wenin was hugging Shu Ruanyu tightly. How could Yang Fan not be enraged at such a scene? Shu Ruanyu's beautiful eyes turned pale with fright as her countenance turned pale. Initially, she still had a chance, but after hearing Qin Wentian's icy voice, "Do you want to perish together with me?" This caused her to miss out on the best opportunity. However, Qin Wenyan didn't show the slightest bit of politeness and continued to attack her several more times, causing her to be suppressed by Qin Wenyan. Qin Wenyan was also heavily injured. If it weren't for his all-out attack, he wouldn't have had the chance to subdue Shu Ruanyu. Currently, the 3 Yuanfu in his body were on the verge of drying up. Only his demon Yuanfu still had some astral energy left, but in a battle of this level he wouldn't be able to sustain it for long. "You are Zhang Qin." A voice drifted over from the void. It was none other than Bai Lu Jing's voice. Qin Wenyan swept his gaze over, staring at the masked swordsman in the air, before shifting his gaze onto Yang Fan, Hua Xiaoyun, and the rest. His gaze was incomparably cold. It seemed like the people of the Moon continent wouldn't be able to tolerate him anymore. However, what did he have to be afraid of? As he thought of this, a ruthless glint flickered in Qin Wentian's eyes. Chapter 299. Zhang Qin, a heavens chosen from the Pill Emperor Hall. Yang Fan, a heavens chosen from the star-seizing manor. Hua Xiaoyun, although his status in the Hua clan wasn't high, his elder brother, Hua Taishu, was the top ranker in the heavenly fate rankings. These people all bore a grudge against him, and to Zhang Qin, they all wanted to silence him. Maybe in Yang Fan's eyes, it didn't matter if he killed him or not. If they met, so be it. Since this was the case, he wouldn't stay in the Moon continent any longer. What else was there for him to fear? Hee. Qin Wendian inclined his head, and upon seeing Hua Xiaoyun's protector rushing over, he coldly laughed. "If you don't want her to die, you'd better stand there and not move." "What does she have to do with me?" Hua Xiaoyun's protector coldly replied. "You can say that to Yang Fan." Qin Wenyan laughed, and momentarily, Hua Xiaoyun's protector didn't dare to act recklessly. If Qin Wenyan really went crazy and killed Shu, although Yang Fan wouldn't spare Qin Wenyan, if he vented his anger on Qin Wenyan, a mere heavenly dipper sovereign like him wouldn't be able to escape the clutches of the star-seizing manor. "Release her, and the matter between us shall be written off," Yang Fan stated to Qin Wenyan. "If you want to act, then act. But now you want to write it off?" Qin Wendian swept his gaze over to Yang Fan. Release Shu Ruanyu? Even if he could walk out of the Moon continent alive, it would still be a problem. How could the current him trust his enemies so easily? "Little rascal, come over here." Qin Wendian glanced at Little Rascal. Momentarily, Little Rascal brought Fan Lu and Chu Mang to his side. "Release me." Shu Ruanyu felt incomparably embarrassed. She was tightly hugged by Qin Wendian, and it felt as though she was lying on top of Qin Wendian. Miss Shu's words are too funny. Qin Wentian's palms trembled as he delivered another palm strike onto Shu Ruanyu's body. A terrifying amount of energy gushed into her body, causing her to groan in agony. "Since Miss Shu wants to kill me, don't joke around," Qin Wendian said indifferently. Yang Fan's eyes were gloomy, as though he could kill someone. Shu Ruanyu was Yang Fan's fiancée, yet now she was being humiliated by Qin Wendian. "If you dare to touch her again, I guarantee that you will die," Yang Fan threatened coldly. "I have no regrets if I can die with a beauty." Qin Wendian smiled sarcastically. He was not afraid at all. Gazing into the air, he glanced at the masked swordsman in the air and said with a smile, "However, Yang Fan, you value this woman so much. It seems that your feelings for her are not ordinary, much better than for Zhang Qin." Buzz. As the sound of his voice faded, The masked swordsman whistled through the air as Bai Lu Jing blocked his path. This caused Qin Wenyan to laugh. Seems like you are indeed Zhan Chen. The eyes of the masked swordsman stiffened. He knew that he had been tricked. However, Qin Wenyan continued, Zhan Chen, you didn't dare to step past the traps in the refinement grounds, so you fed a medicinal pill to your lover to stimulate her potential, allowing her to act as a scout for you. In the end, she died in the refinement grounds. Who would have thought that I would encounter her? I was too impatient to silence her. As the sound of Qin Wentian's voice faded, the spectators all had expressions of shock on their faces. Zhan Chen had personally caused the death of his lover? Since Zhan Chen wanted to kill him so badly, there was no need to hide this secret any longer. Qin Wenyan should go back and think about how he would explain this to the Pill Emperor Hall. What a pitiful beauty! She clearly knew that you were a wolf with wild ambitions, and that there was something strange about the medicinal pill, yet she still willingly consumed it, dying for you. Zhan Chen, where is your conscience? Qin Wenyan coldly stated. That masked swordsman actually calmed down, no longer daring to kill Qin Wenyan. At this moment, if he were to madly rush towards Qin Wenyan again, it would undoubtedly mean that he was Zhan Chen. At the same time, he would also be admitting that Qin Wentian's words were true. Zhan Chen definitely couldn't admit this. Despite the towering killing intent in his heart, he could only endure it. No one had seen his true face, and since he wasn't Zhan Chen, he naturally couldn't kill him to silence him. But in his heart, he had already sentenced Qin Wenyan to death for betraying him. Big Brother Jing, in the future, if Zhan Chen wants to deal with you, it means that the person in front of you is definitely Zhan Chen. Qin Wenyan coldly laughed. Since Zhan Chen didn't want to admit it now, in the future when Zhan Chen wanted to deal with Bai Lu Jing, he would have to admit it. Now that he was fighting against Bai Lu Jing, it was equivalent to admitting to Qin Wentian's words. At that time, the Pill Emperor Hall wouldn't help Zhan Chen. Zhan Chen was destined to swallow this grievance. Even if he died, he wouldn't admit it. Who asked him to disguise himself as an assassin to deal with Qin Wenyan? At this moment, Zhan Chen's heart was incomparably sullen. You're dead for sure. Hua Xiaoyun stared at Qin Wenyan, the smile on his face growing increasingly malevolent. This Qin Wenyan must have gone mad. Kidnapping Xu Ruanyu, and even exposing Zhan Chen's secret? Regardless of whether it was true or false, Zhan Chen would definitely kill Qin Wenyan. Zhan Chen wouldn't admit that it was him today, and similarly, he wouldn't admit to Qin Wentian's words. But as long as he said that Qin Wenyan had maliciously slandered him, this excuse would be sufficient for him to kill Qin Wenyan. Qin Wenyan would die without a doubt. Qin Wenyan didn't bother with Hua Xiaoyun. His gaze shifted onto Qing Er's battlefield. The translucent golden lotus light screen shattered, revealing Qing Er's silhouette. The golden armored puppet had already been crippled. However, the reason why it was crippled was because it had assisted Qing Er in killing the female Heavenly Dipper cultivator from the Heavenly Dipper realm. A puppet in exchange for a Heavenly Dipper realm cultivator. Out of the 4 Heavenly Dipper realm cultivators from the Heavenly Dipper realm, 3 had already died. This time, the Heavenly Dipper realm had suffered heavy casualties. The last person was the coachman. He stared at Qing Er. The killing intent radiating from him was even stronger than before. His strength was also the strongest among the Heavenly Dipper realm cultivators. You leave first. Qing Er's melodious voice rang out. Even without turning her head, Qin Wenyan knew that she was talking to him. I'll be fine. Seeing that Qin Wenyan didn't move, Qing Er's voice was filled with confidence. I'm not worried about him. Qin Wenyan spoke. Qing Er's beautiful eyes flickered as she understood. Qin Wenyan was worried that other people in the moon continent would act against her. For example, the star-seizing manor. Master gave me a life-saving treasure. This time around, Qing Er's voice directly rang out in Qin Wentian's ears, causing Qin Wenyan to suddenly understand. That's right, Xiu was the disciple of Fairy Qing. How could she not have life-saving treasures on her? Fairy Qingmei had sent Qing Er here to protect him. It was impossible that she hadn't considered the possibility that Qing Er herself might be in danger. Let's kill someone before we leave, Qin Wenyan indifferently replied, as his gaze abruptly shifted onto Hua Xiaoyun. Not long ago, Hua Xiaoyun had ordered his guards to kill him. Hence, he wasn't too far away from Qin Wenyan. At this moment, in front of Hua Xiaoyun and his guards, was the golden-armored puppet. Qin Wenyan's eyes flickered with a terrifying coldness, causing Hua Xiaoyun's expression to stiffen. Qin Wenyan couldn't even protect himself, yet he still wanted to kill him? Fan Lu and Chu Mang were already prepared, their arrows already nocked. Hua Xiaoyun's guards froze, as they pulled Hua Xiaoyun's body along as they retreated. At the same time, the golden-armored puppet dashed forward. Qin also seemed to understand Qin Wenyan's intentions. She turned her gaze over as her mandate of space gushed forth. Instantly, Hua Xiaoyun's guards felt as though they had collided into a spatial barrier. In that short instant, the golden-armored puppet had already arrived, its ice-cold blade slashing towards Hua Xiaoyun's guards. Little Rascal also dashed forward, bringing Qin Wenyan and the other two closer to Hua Xiaoyun. Qin Wenyan's purpose in coming to the moon continent was to kill Hua Xiaoyun. Now that Hua Xiaoyun was so close to him, how could he not die? Have you gone crazy? Hua Xiaoyun roared in rage upon seeing Qin Wenyan closing in on him. Hua Xiaoyun's guards blocked the golden-armored puppet's attack, and just as he was about to send a palm strike towards Qin Wenyan, he saw Shu Ruanyu standing in front of Qin Wenyan. If he attacked Qin Wenyan, the first person he would kill would be Shu Ruanyu. Scram! With a roar of rage, Hua Xiaoyun's guards slammed both palms onto the golden-armored puppet. In that instant, a crisp sound rang out from the golden-armored puppet, as though it was on the verge of exploding. At the same time, a third eye appeared in the center of Qin Wenyan's brows, penetrating straight into Hua Xiaoyun's sea of consciousness. In that instant, Hua Xiaoyun's mind went blank. The one who attacked him earlier wasn't Qin, but Qin Wenyan? Boom! Hua Xiaoyun clutched his head with one hand as the arrow whistled through the air. The countenance of Hua Xiaoyun's guard drastically changed. The instant the golden-armored puppet exploded, a boundless amount of saber light swept through the entire space. It was difficult for him to free his hands, but for the sake of Hua Xiaoyun's life, he had no choice but to grab hold of the arrow. Arg! A piercing sound rang out as Hua Xiaoyun's guard screamed in agony. His arm was severed by the saber light, and the shockwaves of the explosion continued unabated. Wasn't the creator of this golden-armored puppet a little too ruthless? The most ruthless attack came from the self-detonation of the golden-armored puppet. Hua Xiaoyun! A thunderous roar thundered out. Hua Xiaoyun inclined his head and stared into Qin Wenyan's eyes, only to see Qin Wenyan stretching out his palm and pointing a finger in front of him. Instantly, a boundless amount of demonic qi gushed forth, causing the entire space to darken. As the finger landed, the demonic qi in the air seemed to sever the heavens. The purpose of this trip to the moon continent is to kill you. As the sound of Qin Wenyan's voice faded, Hua Xiaoyun's mind went blank, only that ice-cold voice remained. The purpose of this trip to the moon continent was to kill him. Now, no matter the cost, he had to make sure he stayed here. Pooh! The heaven-breaking finger slammed into Hua Xiaoyun's head, instantly killing him. Although his mastery of the heaven-breaking finger wasn't perfect, it was more than enough to kill Hua Xiaoyun. Hua Xiaoyun would use his life to pay for the enmity of Qin Cheng. Qin Wenyan didn't hesitate to travel all the way from Chu to the moon continent just to kill him. As soon as Qin Wenyan's heaven-breaking finger fell, the little guy turned around and flew away. Arg! His fourth-ranked puppet had been destroyed, but it had also caused him to almost lose his life. Hua Xiaoyun, whom he was protecting, had also died. Now that he was heavily injured, he didn't even think about killing Qin Wenyan. Instead, he was thinking about how he could save his own life. Hua Xiaoyun had died. Even if he was trash, he was still a descendant of the Hua clan. Hua Xiaoyun's parents, as well as Hua Taishu, would definitely not allow him to live. He had to escape. The battle today could be said to be extremely brutal. All of Qin Wenyan's puppets had been destroyed, and he himself had sustained heavy injuries. Yang Fan stepped out, chasing after Qin Wenyan, who was about to leave. You haven't released her yet. If you continue to chase after me, a life for a life. If you stop now, I, Qin Wenyan, guarantee that I won't harm her life. Qin Wentian's voice drifted over. How can I trust you? Yang Fan icily replied. I can use my status as his friend to guarantee that he will spare Shu Ruanyu, Bailu Jing indifferently stated. In order to allow Qin Wendian to leave as soon as possible, Bailu Jing had made this promise, causing Qin Wendian to feel extremely touched. Zhan Chen was ranked number 11 in the Heavenly Fate rankings, and it was obvious that he was stronger than Bailu Jing. However, after Qin Wendian revealed his secret, Zhan Chen didn't dare to release his astral souls, nor did he dare to use his strongest innate techniques. In fact, there were many techniques that he couldn't use. Fine, Qin Wenyan, remember this. If anything happens to Ruanyu, both Bailu Jing and Bailu Yi will die for sure. Yang Fan's voice was as cold as ice. I will release her. As for Yang Fan and Zhan Chen, Qin, will remember this. Qin Wentian's silhouette disappeared in the distance. Yang Fan halted his steps, yet his gaze was still fixed on Qin Wentian's back. Qin Wendian could be considered lucky today. The reason why Bailu Jing, Fan Lu and Chu Meng appeared was because they wanted to inform him of the White Deer Institute's decision. But who would have thought that when they were about to arrive, Little Rascal would know that Qin Wenyan was in danger? Naturally, if it weren't for Qin Wentian's determination to capture Ruanyu as a hostage, even if the other experts hadn't arrived yet, Yang Fan would have been able to kill him. Chapter 300. Yang Fan didn't chase after Qin Wenyan. Bailu Jing and Bailu Yi were Qin Wentian's good friends. They wouldn't be able to escape. Yang Fan believed that Qin Wenyan wouldn't dare to do anything to Shu Ruanyu. Qin Wenyan wasn't worried. He had already done what he needed to do in the Moon Continent. Hua Xiaoyun was already dead, and the White Deer Institute already knew of his existence. There was no need for him to worry about the Pill Emperor Hall or the Star-Seizing Manor acting against him. To the Pill Emperor Hall, the only person he had offended was Zhan Chen. As for the Star-Seizing Manor, he had a grudge with Yang Fan. These transcendent powers wouldn't interfere in the matters of the younger generations. The one who would bring danger to Qin Wenyan was the Hua clan. Although Hua Xiaoyun had no status in the Hua clan, his parents and elder brother Hua Taishu would definitely not spare Qin Wenyan. He couldn't stay in the Moon Continent any longer. Little Rascal's current speed was already extremely fast. They directly sped towards the easternmost region of the Moon Continent, exiting the boundaries of the Moon Continent. In the air, amidst the clouds, Qin Wenyan cast a glance back at the vast ancient city. Grand Xia had millions of cities, and the 9 continents stood at the pinnacle of them all. Maybe what he had left behind in this ancient city was just a small stroke of history, and the things he had done wouldn't be able to bring too much shock to the people of this ancient city. After all, the commotion caused by those heavenly dipper sovereigns was far more eye-catching. However, the words spoken by Qin Wendian the other day still caused a huge commotion, especially in the Pill Emperor Hall. Countless disciples were discussing the same thing, Zhan Chen. And just like what Qin Wendian had predicted, Zhan Chen naturally denied it. He had always told his master that Qin Yu's death had something to do with Qin Wendian. These discussions finally reached Mo Qingqing's ears. Very swiftly, she found out everything about Qin Wendian, as well as everything he had sacrificed. Within the Pill Emperor Hall on the 99 steps, Mo Qingqing slowly walked forwards. Every step she took was extremely heavy, and her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. Just moments ago, she found out that Qin Wendian had killed his way into the Moon Continent, sparing no expense to kill Hua Xiaoyun. I came to the Moon Continent to kill you. In the eyes of others, these simple words caused Mo Qingqing's heart to melt. Her heartstrings were deeply stirred. Who was he that he had traveled millions of miles from Chu to the Moon Continent to kill Hua Xiaoyun? For her, Mo Qingqing. In front of Mo Qingqing, her master, Luo He, Zhan Chen, as well as Zhan Chen's master, were all present. Junior sister is here. Zhan Chen smiled at Mo Qingqing, only to see Mo Qingqing coldly glancing at him. That gaze of hers was so cold that it could pierce right into the bones, causing Zhang Chen's heart to turn cold. Master, do you know who the fourth-ranked divine inscriptionist that Zhang Chen spoke of is? Mo Qingqing asked as she stared at her master, Luo He. Luo He stared at Mo Qingqing in bewilderment as she asked, Qingqing, do you know him? Master has seen him before. At that time, I was heavily injured and unconscious, Mo Qingqing calmly replied. Glancing at Bai Fei, who was standing beside Luo He, she added, Senior sister Bai Fei knows him as well. Bai Fei's beautiful eyes narrowed. She instantly understood that Mo Qingqing already knew. Bai Fei, what's going on? Luo He glanced at Bai Fei, only to see Bai Fei lowering her head as she replied, Qin Wenin is none other than the man that junior sister Qingqing fell in love with back in Chu. Luo He's eyes flashed with a sharp light. That legendary fourth-ranked divine inscriptionist was actually Mo Qingqing's lover? Zhang Chen said that senior sister Qingyue's death had something to do with him, and he said that Zhang Chen was the culprit. Regardless of the Pill Emperor Hall's attitude, I would naturally believe him. Mo Qingqing's words caused Zhang Chen's countenance to turn incredibly unsightly. Junior sister, are you saying that I would harm Qingyue? Don't call me junior sister. I have nothing to do with you, Mo Qingqing coldly replied. Impudent. Luo He berated, only to see Mo Qingqing calmly looking at her. Master, he spared no expense to kill Hua Xiaoyun. You should understand why he didn't hesitate to offend the Hua clan in order to kill Hua Xiaoyun. Luo He's eyes flickered as she recalled the grudge between Mo Qingqing and Hua Xiaoyun. Because of you? He said that the reason he came to the Moon Continent was to kill Hua Xiaoyun. He came all the way here from Chu to kill Hua Xiaoyun for me. A gentle smile appeared on Mo Qingqing's cold countenance as she continued, but now, the Pill Emperor Hall wants to kill him. As she spoke up to hear, Mo Qingqing's tone grew even colder. I know Master treats me very well, and has taught me many things. I respect Master, but even before I was acquainted with Master, I had already fallen in love with him. He was willing to travel thousands of miles to the Moon Continent, sparing no expense to kill Hua Xiaoyun. If anything happens to him, Qingqing will also spare no expense to avenge him. Hence, Disciple doesn't wish to become a traitor to the Pill Emperor Hall. Please forgive Disciple for being disrespectful. After which, Mo Qingqing bowed to Luo He as she stated in a low voice, Disciple shall take her leave. Mo Qingqing turned and left, while Luo He was so angry that her body was trembling. Vile Disciple. Mo Qingqing's last sentence, saying that she didn't wish to become a traitor to the Pill Emperor Hall, was undoubtedly telling Luo He that if the Pill Emperor Hall killed Qin Wendian, she would become a traitor to the Pill Emperor Hall. How could Luo He not be angered? She had done so much for Mo Qingqing. Zhang Chen's countenance turned ashen. Initially he was very interested in Mo Qingqing, whom Luo He deeply doted on. But who would have thought that because of Qin Wenin, Mo Qingqing would view him as an enemy? Qin Wendian. The hatred in Zhang Chen's heart for Qin Wendian grew to the extreme, yet he maintained a calm expression on his face. Maintaining a gentle and cultured demeanor, he stated, Master, Senior Aunt, Disciple doesn't wish to argue with you. Currently, my cultivation has reached a bottleneck, and I wish to head out to temper myself for a period of time. At the same time, I need to prepare some resources to break through to the Heavenly Dipper realm. Work hard and break through to Heavenly Dipper within a year. Don't be distracted by this matter. Zhang Chen's master patted him on his shoulders in consolation. Heavenly Dipper was the first major hurdle for stellar martial cultivators, and many would never be able to cross it in their entire lives. However, with Zhang Chen's talent, it wasn't difficult for him to cross it. 5 days later, Qin Wenyan was already far away from the Moon Continent. At this moment, he was at least 10,000 miles away from the Moon Continent, and was situated within a mountain range. Outside this mountain range, there was a small country. The Grand Xia Empire was extremely vast, and there were many small countries within it. Behind these small countries, there might be the shadow of the 9 continents, just like the relationship between the 9 mystical palace and Chu. Outside the cave dwelling, Qin Wendian sat cross-legged with a yuan meteor stone in his hands. He released his astral souls as the blood in his body surged. After a few days of recuperation, his aura gradually calmed down, and his injuries were almost fully healed. "When will you release me?" A fiery red silhouette walked out from the cave dwelling. It was none other than Shu Ruanyu, and although the color of blood had returned to her, she still looked extremely haggard. "Why are you in such a hurry?" Qin Wenyan opened his eyes, glancing at Shu Ruanyu as he stated, "Miss Shu, you should focus on recuperating." "You bastard!" Shu Ruanyu's countenance turned ashen. These few days, she had been resting in this cave dwelling, and even at night, she didn't dare to close her eyes. That damnable fatty's eyes would occasionally roam about her body, causing her to want nothing more than to gouge his eyes out. Qin Wenyan stood up and walked towards Shu Ruanyu. Upon seeing Qin Wenyan walking towards her, Shu Ruanyu involuntarily retreated. An expression of shame and anger appeared on her face as she glared at Qin Wenyan. "What do you want?" Qin Wenyan walked towards Shu Ruanyu. Shu Ruanyu gritted her teeth, as a hint of fear flickered in her eyes. Astral energy started to fluctuate from her body. "If you dare to touch me, even if I die, Bai Lu Yi and Bai Lu Jing won't be able to live either," Shu Ruanyu threatened. "Let me remind you one more time, when I'm cultivating, it's best if you don't disturb me." Qin Wenyan emotionlessly spoke, as he swept his gaze over Shu Ruanyu's body. "Also, I have no interest in you." After speaking, Qin Wenyan turned and sat back down, causing Shu Ruanyu to clench her fists tightly, as her countenance grew incredibly unsightly to behold. "This damnable bastard. Since you've already inscribed a divine imprint here, shouldn't you at least allow me to recover my cultivation base?" Shu Ruanyu refused to give up. Qin Wenyan had placed a formation on her body, causing her astral energy to circulate at an extremely slow rate. Even now, her injuries had yet to recover. "Don't you think it's a little ungentlemanly for you to treat a weak girl like this?" Shu Ruanyu continued when she saw Qin Wenyan remaining silent. "Fatty!" Qin Wenyan called out. Momentarily, Fan Lu descended from the skies. He cast a glance at Shu Ruanyu, and in an instant, Shu Ruanyu shut her mouth as she turned and walked towards the cave dwelling. "Little Rascal and Chu Mang aren't back yet?" Qin Wenyan asked Fan Lu. "Brother Mang has a lot of strength, and there are plenty of demonic beasts in the depths of the mountain range for him to train with." Fan Lu grinned, as a smile flickered in his eyes. "I'm going to take a walk outside. If we continue heading east, we'll be able to reach the Azure continent after passing through a few more countries." Azure continent. An expression of contemplation appeared on Qin Wenyan's face. The Azure Emperor Palace was located in the Azure continent, but the current Azure Emperor Palace was no longer the same as it was in the past. Although it was still a transcendent power, it was no longer the same as before. Other than the Azure Emperor Palace, it seemed that the clan of that fellow Ouyang was also located in the Azure continent. If you want to obtain the top 3 rankings in the Heavenly Fate rankings of Grand Xia, you will definitely have to head to the 9 continents. Fan Li's expression grew serious as he stared at Qin Wenyan. The White Deer Institute might very well become the #1 transcendent power in the Grand Xia Empire. Qin Wenyan nodded his head. Obtaining the top 3 rankings in the Heavenly Fate rankings was something he definitely had to do. The reason why Bai Lu Jing accompanied Fan Lu and Chu Mang to look for him was because the White Deer Institute wanted Bai Lu Jing to pass on a message to Qin Wenyan. After many days of discussion, the White Deer Institute finally came to a consensus. They naturally acknowledged Qin Wenyan's attainments in the Tao of Divine Inscriptions. If Qin Wenyan could obtain the top 3 rankings in the Heavenly Fate rankings, from then on, the White Deer Institute would completely accept their new identity and follow Qin Wenyan's every command. In order to achieve this consensus, the White Deer Institute even stripped Bai Lu Tong's father of his position as an elder, allowing him to be in charge of the Tao of Divine Inscriptions while another doyen replaced him. This news was undoubtedly extremely important to Qin Wenyan. If he could obtain the full support of the White Deer Institute, it would be much easier for him to reorganize the hidden Azure faction. Chapter 301. Early in the morning, when she woke up, there were traces of moisture in the air. In the cave, Shu Ruanyu was leaning against the mountain wall, her beautiful eyes closed and her hands covering her body. Although Qin Wendian had released her restraints yesterday, allowing her to cultivate, as long as she was in the cave, she would still be restricted. Drip, drip. A crisp sound rang out. Shu Ruanyu opened her tired eyes and glanced at the cave. There was no one else in sight. Emichim? Shu Ruanyu instantly stood up and walked out of the cave. There was no one outside, only the water droplets falling from the trees could be heard. I'm leaving. Shu Ruanyu let out a long sigh. Finally, she didn't need to worry about that damnable fatty anymore. But in the past few days, Qin Wendian had kept his promise and didn't make things difficult for her. Qin Wendian, I will never forget you, Shu Ruanyu coldly stated. After which, her silhouette flickered as she soared up into the air. Qin Wendian had long since left. He had released Shu Ruanyu because of Bailu Jing and Bailu. What happened that day was all because of him. Capturing Shu Ruanyu and threatening her had nothing to do with Bailu Jing. As long as Shu Ruanyu was safe, Yang Fan wouldn't vent his anger on Bailu Jing. After all, the White Deer Institute still had some status in the eastern region of the Moon continent. Although it couldn't be compared to the Star-Seizing Manor, the Star-Seizing Manor wouldn't offend the White Deer Institute for no reason. And now, Qin Wendian was extremely cautious. Since he had released Shu Ruanyu, there was no way he would stay here any longer. Qiyun was a country that bordered the Azure continent and was under the jurisdiction of the Azure continent. Qiyun was a subsidiary power of the Transcendent Power, the Ouyang aristocrat clan, similar to the relationship between the Nine Mystical Palace and Chu. Although the Ouyang aristocrat clan was a transcendent power, if they wanted to continue to stand tall in the 9 continents, they naturally had to be exaggerated. Just relying on the bloodline of the Ouyang aristocrat clan wasn't enough. In Grand Xia, all transcendent powers would constantly recruit new blood, and the Ouyang aristocrat clan was no exception. Outside of the royal capital of Qiyun, there was a famous mountain, the Gazing Dragon Mountain. It was one of the most famous mountain ranges in Qiyun. The reason why the Gazing Dragon Mountain range was so famous was because of the Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart. The Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart was incomparably wondrous, and one could comprehend innate techniques from it. It was rumored that the Heavenly Dipper sovereigns of Qiyun had left this treasure for the cultivators of Qiyun. For a small country, stepping into the Heaven Dipper realm meant that they had reached a certain level. It was impossible for them to stay there for long, and they would leave. Among them, there were some who were reluctant to leave their homeland and were willing to leave behind some things for their descendants. After thousands of years, the Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart was built. The stone platforms on the ancient mountain in front of the Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart seemed to have been flattened by Wuxiu. Every day, many figures would come here to meditate on the Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart, trying to obtain some of the divine abilities passed down by the ancestors. At this moment, on one of the stone platforms, a young man with a burly physique was unceasingly brandishing the great axe in his hands. Every swing of the axe contained no astral energy, yet it was as if the wind was stirred up by it. The skin of this burly young man was bronze in color, and the muscles on his body were extremely sturdy, as though he was filled with an explosive strength. However, he didn't seem to be too old, and was definitely no older than 25 years of age. What was even more interesting was that this young man had already been brandishing the great axe for a total of 7 days without stopping. It was as though he didn't care about how others viewed him. How much do you guys guess the weight of this great axe? Someone on one of the stone platforms asked with a smile. I'm afraid it's at least 250 jin. This man has nothing but brute strength. Another person on another stone platform replied. His axe technique seems to be getting heavier and heavier, yet he doesn't seem tired at all. How strange. There are so many strange people. Over there, isn't there someone who sleeps all day long? Have you guys ever seen him not sleeping? At this moment, someone pointed to a stone platform not far away from the burly young man. There was a young man quietly lying there, as though the wind and rain of the outside world had nothing to do with him. Both of them are idiots. The day before yesterday, There was a heavy downpour, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. This burly young man didn't seem to notice and continued swinging his great axe. That person was even sleeping there. How strange. But what was even more strange was that beside that person, there was an extremely beautiful snow-white puppy quietly lying there. It would occasionally get up and move around, looking extremely adorable. "Little rascal, come here." At this moment, a young girl with a pure and innocent appearance called out to the snow-white puppy. The body of the snow-white puppy flickered and instantly leapt into the arms of the young girl, causing the young girl to giggle. She hugged the puppy in her arms and gently stroked it with her tiny hands. Little rascal seemed to be enjoying it very much, causing many to cast envious and jealous gazes at him. "Your master is truly lazy. He doesn't even care if you are hungry or not." The young girl glanced in the direction of Qin Wenyan. These days, she had become very familiar with Little Rascal and would often come over to hug it. However, its master had always been sleeping there. "Yishi, you're here?" Not far away, a slightly plump silhouette walked over. The young girl glanced at him and smiled. "What are you doing here again?" "I'm the brother of that little fellow's master." Fan Lu smiled. However, the young girl snorted and asked Little Rascal, "Is he?" "Little Rascal, come here." Fatty called out to Little Rascal. Little Rascal's head popped out and glanced at Fan Lu. After which, it acted as though it didn't recognize Fan Lu and dove back into Yi Shi's embrace. "Did you see that?" Yi Shi glared at Fan Lu, causing Fatty to roll his eyes. "What an ingrate." Fan Lu sat down bored. He glanced at the sleeping Qin Wenyan and the hatchet-wielding Chu Mang. They had already been in Chiyun for quite some time, and their destination this time around was naturally the Azure continent. However, Qin Wenyan wanted to raise his strength before entering the Azure continent. After cultivating for a period of time, he found out that this was the hopeful Dragon Mountain Rampart. At this moment, the sleeping Qin Wenyan suddenly sat up. Little Rascal's snow-white body instantly transformed into a beam of white light as it dashed into Qin Wentian's embrace. Little Rascal's little paws unceasingly scratched at Qin Wentian's body, appearing exceptionally intimate. "Boss, you're finally awake." Fan Li's eyes brightened as he turned to Qin Wenyan. "Boss, this is Yi Shi, my friend. She's quite close to Little Rascal, but this little fellow actually doesn't recognize me. How detestable." "Who are you talking to?" Qin Wenyan couldn't recognize Fatty at all. Glancing at Yi Shi, he couldn't help but feel disdain in his heart. Fatty was truly a man of universal love. "You win." Fan Lu was completely speechless. How rare, the sleeping god actually woke up. Someone exclaimed in astonishment. "This fellow really knows how to sleep." "Sleeping god, are you here to cultivate or to sleep?" "Sleeping god?" A smile curled up the corners of Qin Wentian's lips, curled up in a speechless smile. During this period of time, he hadn't stopped cultivating at all. After the great battle back then, his 3 yuan fu had been emptied, and he was also heavily injured. After recovering from his injuries, he once again absorbed the astral energy in his body, filling his yuan fu pool to the brim. To his surprise, his yuan fu pool had actually expanded a little. Hence, he continued cultivating bitterly for a period of time, yet he still wasn't able to break through. It wasn't until he arrived at the Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart that he actually broke through to the 5th level of yuan fu in a single day. How marvelous! Fatty, this rampart of the Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart is extremely marvelous. The innate techniques contained within are as numerous as the stars in the sky, allowing one to comprehend them. Qin Wenyan spoke to Fan Lu, wanting to persuade him to cultivate more. "Don't worry, I can still comprehend this rampart." Fatty grinned. "Look, even Bro Mang can comprehend it, let alone a genius like me." Qin Wenyan shifted his gaze onto Chu Mang. At first glance, Chu Mang's axe technique seemed ordinary, but upon closer inspection he discovered that there was a marvelous intricacies hidden within. "It's that axe technique." Qin Wentian's eyes brightened. There was an extremely marvelous axe technique within the Gazing Dragon Mountain Rampart. Although it looked chaotic, It contained a majestic aura that allowed one to circulate the arterial pathways within one's body in sync with the axe technique. He's also your friend? Yi Shi's beautiful eyes flashed. Qin Wendian nodded his head. A bunch of weirdos. Yi Shi's lips twitched. However, someone at the side laughed. What a shameless, boastful fellow. Could it be that the god of sleep can comprehend the gazing dragon mountain rampart in his sleep? Qin Wendian swept his gaze over the crowd. The majority of the people here were at the Yuanfu realm, and there weren't many who were at the upper third level of Yuanfu. Occasionally, there would be a few who were at the arterial circulation realm. Casually smiling, Qin Wendian didn't argue with them, and continued his cultivation in peace. In the blink of an eye, winter arrived. The rain and snow became ordinary, and occasionally, the howling of the cold wind could be heard. The number of Wu Xiu on the gazing dragon mountain rampart gradually decreased. Snowflakes danced in the air. Qin Wendian stretched out his hand, and a snowflake landed on his palm, melting away. Inclining his head, he stared at the sky. Amidst the snowflakes, that beautiful silhouette once again appeared. Another year had passed. Was Qingsheng doing well in the Pill Emperor Hall? In Chu, his father, sister Qin Yao, teacher Mustang, senior sister Luo Huan, were they doing well? It was almost time for the annual memorial ceremony in Chu, and the Chu country should be bustling with activity. And now, he was already 19 years old. These 3 years felt like a very long time had passed, and he had experienced many things. The weather is cold, let's eat some hot snacks. Not far away, a young lady walked over with a bamboo basket filled with steaming hot snacks. Seeing the faint longing in Qin Wendian's eyes, she smiled. Wendian Go, are you thinking of the girl you like? Qin Wendian gazed at the innocent smile on the young lady's face as he stretched out his hands and tousled her hair. During these few days, he and Yi Shi had become much closer. There's delicious food again. Fatty walked over as he grinned. Although Wu Xiu didn't need to eat, it was a wonderful thing to be able to satisfy his appetite occasionally. The three of them sat on the stone platform, and the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. At this moment, a beam of white light flashed past. Qin Wendian shifted his gaze over, only to see Chu Mang brandishing his great axe. Instantly, the snowflakes drifting down from the sky converged into a snow dragon that danced in the air. How beautiful! Yi Shi's beautiful eyes flickered. Qin Wendian's eyes also brightened as a smile appeared on his face. Chu Mang had broken through. This snow is really good. Qin Wendian smiled. Right now, their strength had all improved. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.